So good evening and welcome to the joint meeting of the Westborough Board of Selectmen and Westborough Board of Health here on Tuesday, April 14th. Number of folks on the phone, but I'd love to ask folks to, if they can, to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands,
one
nation, under us, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We hope.
Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Selectman Edinburgh, for that. Just real quickly, I do want to read the language to start the meeting because we're going virtual. So pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the town of Westborough, Board of Selectmen and Board of Health is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by turning to Westborough TV's government channels on either Verizon or Charter, or is also streaming online at westboroughTV.org/live-stream-government. And we will post a record of this meeting as soon as we are able. So thank you for that. And as has been going on now for the last few weeks, every Tuesday we are kicking off at 6:30 with a joint meeting of the Board of Health and Board of Selectmen. And we will do that first. And then tonight is a regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting. So there is other Board of Selectmen business that will follow after this joint meeting of the Board of Health and Board of Selectmen. We do have two pieces of discussion on the agenda for this joint meeting, which is a discussion with the town clerk on date, time, location for rescheduled town election, and likewise with the town moderator, a discussion on date, time, and location for annual town meeting. But with that, I'd turn it over to the Chair of the Board of Health, Dr. Walsh, to lead us at this point.
Thank you. I appreciate the fine intro there. As you said, there are a couple of items that we'd like to handle. I think the town clerk and the town moderator business we might be able to handle first. I think that if there's any general discussion that either Syed, you, or Alan want to give about COVID in general, we could certainly lead off with that. But otherwise, I think I'd like to hear from Wendy and John.
Mr. Chair, it's Syed Hashmi.
Yep, go ahead.
So a couple of things. I just wanted to bring this up. I had sent this out to Steve and to the members of the board, in Somerville. So I was hoping at our next scheduled meeting, which I believe is next week. Am I right? It's April 14th. Sorry, April the 21st.
That'll be the next meeting that we have, yes, after this one.
Yeah, so I was wondering that, because housing insecurity is something that is of great concern because of COVID-19. In Somerville, the Board of Health, along with their mayor, has announced an emergency order establishing a moratorium on eviction. And so I sent the link, so I'm hoping that we can discuss that at our next meeting. I just bring that up so that we can put it on the agenda for a discussion.
Yeah, we can put it on the agenda, but I'm going to task you with something, Syed, and that's if you can investigate whether I believe that any sort of eviction would have to go through the courts. And I think
this is the order that just prohibits levying, which is a physical removal of persons and belongings.
Right, and that still would have to go through a court. And so if you could just check to see if actually there's anything already in the courts that is going to prevent that during this period. I thought that there was already something from the administration that prevented that, which would make it so that the local boards of health don't actually have to do anything about it. So if you could just check on that before next meeting,
okay,
then we can certainly have that as an agenda item.
Okay.
Good. So actually, if Wendy, if you or John, I don't know which order you guys want to go in, but if one of you want to introduce the topic that we're discussing.
Yeah, I think if we go with, let's go with Wendy first. I think Wendy, you're first on the posting.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
we
Okay. So we're here to decide when we want to have the town election. I had sent a memo and suggested May 30th or June 6th. Either one. It seems far enough out that I think we wouldn't have to repostpone it. That's my concern because there's so many notifications that we have to do for an election. So the further out it goes is better for me. I mean, if you wanted to go beyond June 6th, that's fine too. Just not to the 27th. But other than that, June's okay. The location being at Town Hall would be it would be good for us as far as getting everything set up and taken down for what I hope is a shorter period of time. And having it upstairs in Memorial Hall would make it much easier for us just to have people coming in and going. And I don't expect a very big turnout just because early voting is allowed the week before and by mail. Or actually, they can start doing early voting anytime by mail. So as soon as I get the warrant posted, I can get it out there that people, if they want to vote, can do that by mail. Absentee voting is also available for those that physically can't get to the polls. And we already have 50 ballots from before. So I kind of doubt we'll get very many more absentee ballots. It'll probably mostly be early voting. And then I also had asked about the polling hours. The polls have to be open for 4 hours. And I just kind of realized it's a Saturday. And so I was thinking more in terms of people, getting to work early and coming home at night. And I realized that probably isn't an issue on a Saturday. So, something like a 9 to 3 might be good, or I don't know, whatever you guys, whatever you think, if you want to break it up or just have it a solid voting time.
And I think I'll throw it out and then we can talk to others. I think I'll give my personal opinion here. I think going to the later date of June 6th makes more sense to me. Just gives us more time in terms of, where we stand and getting people out to vote. So that would be my preference. I think consecutive time makes sense. I don't think there's any reason to split it out. And I guess I would defer to you as to what hours you think we need, but I think starting at 9 would be fine, and going to whatever end time you think that satisfies that we have at least 4 hours. The final thing I would say is really that we should encourage the remote voting, or whatever we're calling it, as much as possible to advertise that, get people to do it, utilize that, even if we are allowed to, basically have in-person voting, which we're hoping for, and we have to put constraints of how many people and spacing and whatnot. I think if we encourage people to vote by mail, that's better for us.
Yeah, I do too. I agree.
Does anyone from the Board of Health have any comments? I mean, my feeling is that May is still looking a little uncertain, but I'm hoping that by June we can start having things like an election. I don't know what other people's thoughts are.
Yeah, if I could just ask you something, if folks could, if anybody that's not talking could put their thing on mute, we'll get an echo.
So, Wendy, it's Sayed. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
So, Wendy, if we, just like with town meeting, if we choose a date for the election and we still are in the middle of having cases and everything, can we cancel it again? Can we postpone it?
Yeah, but that's my understanding. I think we have until June 30th. And then I believe the governor, if it went beyond June 30th, the governor will probably issue some other kind of order. I would imagine, because right now it's, let me just say, in his, the order that he put out, the select board, board of registrars or city council of the town may vote any day prior to the date of their scheduled election to postpone the municipal election or municipal election to a date certain on or before June 30th. So,
And Wendy, we just had sorry, to jump in. We did have a comment here that that June 6th is right now scheduled for high school graduation.
oh,
I'm not sure the timing of that. Is that the evening or afternoon or?
I don't know. Is it usually like in the afternoon, 3 o'clock or something? I don't know. I didn't even think of that.
This
Well,
is Selectman Edinburgh. I believe high school graduation is usually late afternoon. I guess my question for Wendy is, how much time do you need between the election and town meeting? So if we were to do the election on the 13th, would we still be able to do town meeting on the 20th, or do you need more than a week in between?
yeah, no, it doesn't affect anything. It doesn't affect town meeting at all, because we're not, I will be posting a new warrant, which I need everybody to sign as soon as we pick out the date, so I can try to get that done for tomorrow. And so I have a separate warrant. Before, it's always the town meeting and the election are together, but I have town council advised me to have the town election separate.
Okay. So my other question is, would we be better, we're mid-April now, would we be better waiting until, the early May to set the date? I know we need at least 20 days notice. You probably want and need more time than that to prepare. But
Yes.
if we waited till the first week of May to make a decision, that would still give you more than a month, but it would give us a better assurance that we wouldn't have to postpone a second time.
Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah, you'd say like first Tuesday in May. I'm forgetting what.
The downside of waiting too long is that other activities could end up getting scheduled that then might conflict. And it would be nice to kind of have this on the books so that people, when they're looking at what's going on, would know that we're planning on having our election on that day.
We could announce that our intent is to have it on the 6th or the 13th of June, but not make the legal vote an announcement until we know that that's actually a viable date, or of more assurances.
Yeah, I'm inclined to wait a while. I think that the governor has indicated that he's going to be forthcoming with some information on education and the start or further delay of that. Lots of conversation obviously going on about the economy. We're still in the peak of everything. I think it's premature at this point to set a date. I actually had jotted down the 13th as well as a possible date for town election. But at this point, I think we would, we could maybe pencil that in, but we should push out a final decision until we really have a better sense of where we stand with this virus or the pandemic.
I agree that the later we schedule, the better. June 13th sounds safer to me.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We just need to be sure that I have give me 20 days, 25 days prior to it to get it all executed. Just because, and then it helps find people to work. I'm sure I won't need as many people anyways to work the polls on election day, but and I can start now asking who's free.
Wendy, at this point, you will be excited to come out and be purposeful.
I think they will. I know.
Maybe or maybe not. I don't know. But I guess I wonder too is with this. I mean, you want to give people a chance to vote. We're going to encourage early. I'd be curious as what folks think if we're doing it on a Saturday. and again, I do feel like there's no contested races here, but do we just do it at the minimum? Do we do like 9 to 1?
Yeah, it has to be at least 4 hours, so that works.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why we need to go longer for this election, especially if we're pushing the early voting as an option and encouraging people to do that. That should franchise anyone.
Yeah, I guess if we're going to limit to 4 hours, I would prefer 10 to 2, so that if people have a morning commitment or an afternoon commitment, there's a better chance they can make it to the polls. I mean, I realize we're still looking at probably low turnout, but I think 9 to 1 will work. 10 to 2 might give people a little more flexibility.
I'm willing to accept that. Okay, no objections. We'll pencil that in, and we'll have a formal vote maybe next week or the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think the formal vote has to come from the Board of Selectmen, so it's under
Yeah.
our so.
And we're all supportive of it being at Town Hall?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And did we settle right now on the 13th, just to give Wendy some ideas? I guess looking to the Board of Selectmen, is the 13th work for?
Not sooner than the 13th.
I agree with the 13th.
Same here.
Okay, so no sooner than the 13th, but we'll vote on that formally and for signature by hopefully that first meeting in May for you.
Okay. That'd be great.
And then if we can just announce that, pending conditions on the ground, our intent is to schedule the meeting on that date, and let people know that, it's subject to change. We'll make the official announcement once we're confident, so that other organizations and groups don't do something significant that's conflicting.
Okay.
So.
All right.
And then cross your fingers.
Go ahead.
Nate, back to you though. Any concerns, I guess, from a Board of Health standpoint with the date, the time, the location? Any concerns that Board of Health members have on that?
I don't personally think of anything with the building and the layout there. I do. The voting itself is a lot less risky than town meeting. So this one, if we wanted to pencil in June 13th, I'm a lot more comfortable with. As we get to some of these other issues where we're talking about having large groups of people all kind of shoulder to shoulder, that makes me a lot more nervous. But this one, I don't have any concerns. Alan, do you or Syed have any health-related concerns for doing the town elections at Town Hall?
I don't have I don't have a problem with holding the election in Town Hall, but I would just point out that the death toll is still accelerating. There are still pretty impressive single-day fatalities. And I would encourage the senior citizens, if we can, to get the message out to the senior citizens, especially that to vote by mail. They don't necessarily need to come because they're the most vulnerable population. That we should be getting that message out.
I think we have to be very careful. We don't want to word a message that certain groups of people should not come out and vote. I think that's a pretty poor thing to do. But we might be able to say that there's early voting that they could take advantage of or vote in a different way rather than coming out in person.
Yeah, I think we should. I think to that point, I think we should encourage everybody. I think, that would be the best. We have that option available to us. It's been given to us on this one. I think we advertise it, utilize it. And if everyone voted that way and no one had to come, that's a safer way to do it too. So that would be okay. But I think you're right, Dr. Walsh, that it's really, advertising it for all.
Good point.
So I think then maybe we can move on to talk about the town meeting, if that's acceptable.
Okay. You all set?
We are set, John. Thanks.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, everyone. So anyway, thanks for including me in your agenda tonight. I think the probably easiest way to navigate this is I just want to break it down into a couple of key questions. Just to refresh your memory, things are a little bit different for town meeting, as Nathan has referred to. That's essentially people being in the same place at the same time, and I'm also constrained in how far in advance I can schedule things. So the first point of business is, I think, an important message I wanted to get out of the meeting tonight is we're now halfway to the postponed date of April 25th. We know that the governor has said things are going to be pretty much as they are now until May 4th. So I just wanted to make sure that there was consensus, and if so, we could start communicating, especially if we're going to start communicating about intent, to communicate for people to realize that I don't think that there's any chance that we'll actually have the town meeting on the April 25th date. So I think we're in agreement with that, but I'll let anybody speak up if they don't.
I'd actually love to hear from the other members of the Board of Health, but my feeling is that it's not appropriate to have it on April 25th.
That's what I thought. Okay.
And I think from the Board of Selectmen, I think they would all be in agreement that that does not make sense.
Okay, great. So anyway, so one key message is we can start telling people that that although the official postponed to date was April 25th, right now we do not expect or intend to have town meeting on April 25th. So going forward, that leaves me. So that leaves us with the good news is that the Chapter 39, Section 10A legislation did get updated, so we do not have to convene a meeting to postpone again. As long as the emergency is in place, I can postpone the meeting another 30 days. So I have my handy printed out calendar next to me, and so the next item is: do we think that there's any expectation that we would be able to have a town meeting in May? Because I'm essentially trying to target being able to postpone another 30 days with the expectation that we would likely target June 20th but that's two postponements. So I just want to get the sense of that, because Wendy has asked that we not schedule that I not postpone to June 16th. The furthest I can postpone out from the 25th would either be the Saturday, the 23rd, or Monday, the 25th, but that is, of course, Memorial Day weekend. And I don't think it would be appropriate to expect to have a town meeting then, but if we're not planning on having it, that's okay. So why don't I say, so I was thinking of potentially holding off until actually the 25th itself, or maybe the 23rd, like I did last time, and doing a tentative postponement until say Wednesday or Thursday, May 20th or 21st, with the expectation that we wouldn't really have the meeting then, but more likely that would put us within 30 days of being able to schedule it for June 20th.
Hey, John, I think, and I'd like to have others' comments as well. I did see a note for Christie's comments as well, but I know
let me switch over.
But I think that I think you're spot on. I think that in my view, June 20th at this time makes sense for a number of reasons. One is I think that date in May is going to come closer than we think, and I think that I'd be surprised if we want to have a lot of folks in a room at that point. Two is because of everything going on, and probably just as maybe not just as important, but very important is, and we're talking about it later tonight, there's a lot of work going on in terms of looking at budgets and warrant articles right now. Yep. The state is not anywhere close to even being in the first stage of a budget. So I think the more time that we have to get more information and more understanding of the impacts that we're going to see will help us and town meeting vote on the budget and various dollar warrant articles. So, my strong suggestion is that we postpone it as you can until whatever date in May. And I would, if we can, with timing, push it as late as you can, so then it gives us ultimate flexibility. So even if it has to be the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, okay, if we know we're not going to meet that, we're clear with that it's going to postpone again, then that's, that gives us the flexibility to Saturday the 20th or Monday the 22nd or whatever we may need. But, that would be my strong preference.
Okay. I'll let others speak, but I have a couple of other ideas I wanted to float by, but let's just hear what people have to think about targeting the late June meeting.
And may I? This is Lee.
Yep.
I think anything before June 20th would be unwise.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't know if I had unmuted. June 20th would be fine. I mean, certainly I echo what Ian said about having our hopefully having better numbers. We will have borrowed by then. So we'll have that number, which is a number we know has been outstanding since we put the budget together in December. And so that would be helpful. And then, we'll have a better understanding of sort of the impacts of all of this, as we go into a new fiscal year. So I think June 20th is a good date.
Okay. Before I talk about a couple of other ideas, does anybody else want to talk about the June date, or should we just assume everybody thinks that's okay? All right.
Sounds like there's consensus.
Yep.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to mention a couple of other things because I do know that because town meeting is essentially people in one place at one time. I just wanted to float of a couple of ideas. Not that we have to discuss them tonight, but I just wanted to raise a couple of things that other towns are trying and things that we can think about as the date approaches. A couple of things, I'm sure some of you have seen, there was a newspaper article. One town did a short special town meeting in a parking lot where essentially each person or family unit stood in a parking space, which was 6 feet apart. And other people have thought about doing it sort of like graduation style, where we could have people sit far away in the bleachers and do it outside if the weather held up. So there's ways that we could consider having people do that. I've also, as I mentioned last time, been thinking about obviously moving it into the gym, which the gym is a much larger sort of floor space. Brian Callahan of the school department did a back of the envelope guess, and they believe with the old sort of recommendation of 6 foot distance, they could fit up to 350 people in there. But I think that might be both gyms. So I wanted to circle back, and I will with Amber in the school department to figure out how far we could spread people, and essentially just assume that Wendy and I on a little riser would be as far back to the wall as possible, and then let people spread out. So that's another way we can try to mitigate that and try to not have extra expense. And then the one other idea I just wanted to put in your mind, because I've seen it mentioned in some of the moderators' discussions, is some people who already have warrants posted like we have, where the warrant can't easily be changed, have thought about moving to essentially an attempt at the town meeting to do the budget and any important items that might have, and then essentially presenting the meeting with an option to either all at once pass over anything else, so it could be put on a summer or a fall town meeting, or just deal with them that way. So as I thought about the warrant that we have before us, obviously the key thing is getting the budget done as soon as possible. And I know there may be some ways to let the budget go past June 30th, but I think we'd all prefer not to do that. And then there are some items, for instance, pending purchases of land or pending things that there may be a time frame on. But just if we think about the problems that could come from having people in a confined space for a long period of time, as it gets closer, we may think about trying to essentially just do the parliamentary procedures to act on the really important ones, and then either postpone or pass over the other articles to take them up when we know that things are more conducive to a more standard town meeting. So none of that needs any action tonight. I just wanted to put those ideas out there so we can start talking about them and thinking about them for when we do finally have a town meeting.
So I would just add that we've already started talking to department heads about their warrant articles and talking about what we could potentially be deferred. So, the budget was sort of the first step, and so we're certainly doing some of that review of the warrant.
Great.
Hey, John, just a question on the electronic voting.
Yep.
I kind of like the outdoor thing, especially if we're going into June. But
right,
there is weather, but also.
Yeah.
It would probably be something we need to check on the electronic.
I was going to confer with Wendy to talk to our vendor to see. I don't believe there's anything that makes it need to be inside in terms of the signal, but I was going to have Wendy check with our vendor to see if we did it, say in the confines of like the gridded off football field up through the bleachers, would their system be able to cover that space or not?
John, I'm sorry, this question goes back a little bit, but
That's
I was
okay.
having trouble with my microphone. What I wanted to know is, we're talking in a very prudent way about, what if the situations are persisting? But I wanted to just ask you, what if it goes the other way? What if we come to a May 4th and things are looking much better, and the governor says, okay, we're going to open things up again, and you get then to May 20th or so, can you still postpone it to June 20th if there really isn't the ongoing emergency that's justified the postponing up to this point?
Well, yeah, that's actually an interesting question. And I might want to talk to town council and also talk with other moderators. The final wording of what happened to Chapter 39, Section 10A does have some words in there about scheduling. I think I don't want to risk switching browser windows. Does have a point that it's supposed to be, the postponement is supposed to be made at least within 5 days of the lifting of the emergency. However, it's unclear to me whether each town can, I'm supposed to confer with the Board of Selectmen and, Fire Safety Board of Health or whatever. So my belief is that if I confer with Selectmen and Board of Health and we believe that it's still enough of an emergency that our usual 150, 200 people shouldn't congregate in a closed space, I believe I still have the authority to postpone. I don't think there's anything that can make us go ahead if in our best judgment the situation in Westborough is that there's still enough of an emergency to wait. The one thing I don't think that I could do is to move the date closer. So let's say if I postponed until say May 23rd, which is the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, I don't think things could clear up, and then I could say, oh wait, never mind, let's do it on the 18th or something. So I haven't seen any provision in the law to let me move it forward once it's been postponed, but the words are still subject to various interpretation about if the governor says come May 18th that everything's okay, does that mean that we have to hold it on the 23rd? And my reading of it, but I'm not an attorney, my reading of it is that I'm supposed to act in consultation with the selectmen and the various public safety, public health authorities to determine whether it's safe to meet at that time. So I know that was sort of a weaselly answer, but I think that's the best I can do right now.
Yeah, thank you. I think it does actually clear things up. I think it does put it in the hands of the selectmen and the Board of Health or the fire and safety officers. So that's actually where the decision should be made. So I think any date that we're picking, we should have at least the ability to do it that day if we did decide that everything was dramatically cleared up. So if you pick a Saturday to do it, we should all have to bear in mind that we might get stuck with that Saturday in the off chance that everything is improved.
Right.
You might not want to pick a Wednesday if you don't want to have the town meeting on a Wednesday, Right.
Yeah, my reason for sticking with Saturday, even though it would be inconvenient if it was the 23rd, is that it dramatically increases the likelihood we can get through all the top tier articles in one day. And although we do have people in a confined space, unless we have it outside, it does reduce it from having to do it, like 2 evenings in a row. And I think I thought of something else, but now I forgot when I looked at my calendar. So,
John, while you're looking for your notes there, a couple thoughts. One is I don't think we should schedule a town meeting on Memorial Day weekend. I think that if we're all blessed enough that this is a way and people can move and go to other places, they're not going to want to be a town meeting, so it's hard enough to get people there. The other thing is that I would love for the town departments to explore what we had talked about when this all sort of was unleashed upon us, and that was that town departments would do a presentation working in concert with Westborough TV, maybe make those presentations available in advance so that folks could watch them, understand what the article is, thus to hopefully decrease the amount of time that we're actually in at town meeting. So I know that was discussed at one point. I'd love for that to be revisited.
I did remember the one other thing I was going to say, and that's that remember, even if we have a meeting that is convened, if the majority or if enough voters vote, the voters can move to recess and continue. I can only do it unilaterally so many times, but the voters can always decide what order to take things up in, and essentially when they want to recess. So it could be that if we were had it on some evening before, like Memorial Day weekend, just so I don't go beyond the 30 days, the voters then could essentially then act regardless of any state of emergency to postpone till the 20th if somebody put that motion forward and if it carried.
So, John, to that point, just to remind all of us, so it's a 30-day window.
Yes, it's 30 days, and it's 30 days from the day I make the declaration. I don't think that changed in the law. So that's why I wanted to put the word out that the meeting's, just like I did before, put the word out the meeting is not going to happen on the 25th, but I will likely not make the actual formal declaration until the 23rd, 24th, or 25th, just to give us the most lead time.
Yeah, and I mean, just looking at that, if we don't use that weekend, I think if you want June 20th and there's 31 days in May, you're probably, I think, going to Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah, I worked backwards where, let's see, 7, 14, 12.
I think you'd want to be on the...
Yeah. On May 21st is 30 days from June 20th.
Yeah. So you couldn't go any earlier than that and use June 20th as a date that we
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's why I was thinking of doing sometime during the week of the 18th. And if it turned out that things were clear and that we could do it on a school night at the high school and figure out all the details, we could always convene the meeting, try to take up the budget one night, and then see if the meeting would vote to recess until the 20th. I mean, there are parliamentary ways that we can do it. It's just the rule is what I can do unilaterally in consultation with you. The meeting can do whatever it wants as long as it's done by June 30th. Unless we invoke, special statutory permission.
Okay. Be curious to hear those thoughts.
This is Selectman member. I'm comfortable setting the expectation that we, unless things change unexpectedly for the better at this point, that we'd be doing postponements to get us to June 20th. Whether that means John reschedules for the Wednesday or the Thursday even before Memorial Day weekend, with the thought that we'd have a session Thursday night, and if needed to continue, it could be the following Tuesday, or it can be postponed later by the members of town meeting. If something positive were to happen and we were able to, and we wanted to start it in May. So I'm sort of comfortable with that strategy of, setting a postponement for as late as possible in May, not on Memorial Day weekend, to let us get out to the 20th of June.
John, this is Sayed Hashmi.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I just to be clear, you can't. I mean, we don't need to. I mean, just because we don't want to be, it's kind of like a dose response relationship. We don't want to be there for a long time. So let me be clear. We don't need to do all of the articles in one sitting. Am I right? We can do, break it down, and so just we are there for a short, maybe an hour or two, and
right.
Then break, and then recess, and then come back on another day. That is possible, right? Right.
Once we convene, then it's best to not recess in the middle of an article. But once we convene, there's a parliamentary way that a motion can be made to essentially recess the meeting until another time, date, place, and the meeting can do that as much as it wants.
I was going to say the one downside to having it broken up into little chunks is that each time you go in there, you might be sitting next to a different person.
Yeah, that's true.
And just in terms of spreading disease and viruses around, if you're in one place next to one person for a fairly long period of time versus being next to 8 different people 8 different times, I think the chance that you spread the virus is going to be worse in the case where you sit next to 8 different people.
Okay, good point.
Related to that too is I think that, and I understand the potential to break it up, but I think logistically we would not have electronic voting, most likely because it's just we couldn't afford to have them continue to come back at various dates.
And Wendy has extra costs for checking people in and out. So remember, there is much more motion, so it can be done. But certainly the largest chunk people are comfortable with is what's best. And obviously, if we want to rely on electronic voting for most everything, then doing the things that's most relevant for in that chunk would be best.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, John, but once the meeting is started, it really is up to the majority to determine whether the meeting continues or not. So even if someone were to make a parliamentary motion to, a recess to a later time or what have you, if that didn't go in favor, there's some risks there.
Right. Yes. That's a point that I've made in the past. The problem with having one of these meetings that you assume that no one's going to show up and we're just going to recess and continue is that it requires a majority vote. And if 5, 10, 20 voters show up and decide they don't want to do that, then that's what happens. So yes, the risk of convening the meeting is that then we are bound by unless there's an emergency that happens in the middle of the meeting, we're then bound by the rules. So as I've said, it is possible, on any date that we convene. And I've in my lifetime I saw it done when a warrant was actually placed accidentally, I believe on Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. Joe Harrington and Wendy and I, as the chairman of the finance committee at the time, were the only 3 who showed up. And I made the motion to adjourn until the next Monday, and we did that. But if 4 other people showed up and outvoted the 3 of us that were there, we would have had to go. So, all right. Well, that's really all I had. I just wanted some guidance and so if there's going to be any sort of townwide communication, I think we can agree to tell people that given the statements that Governor Baker has made and our own inside Westborough view, the meeting right now that's scheduled for April 25th is not going to happen, and that there will be a declaration of postponement again on or about April 25th into sometime in late May, but that our expectation is that barring some unexpected turnaround, the most likely date would be June 20th. And I think that also has some positives because it gets people back in the cadence of the election, then the town meeting, and not that it makes that much of a difference, but I do think it gets us back to some sense of normalcy, that although there wouldn't be 2 weeks apart, there would be an election, then there would be a pause for the election results to be tabulated, and then we would continue with the town meeting.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Yep. Thanks.
So I know that the Board of Selectmen want to get on to their regularly scheduled meeting fairly soon, but I did want to give a chance for us to convey the numbers formally to the Board of Selectmen. So I don't know if, Steve, if you're online and you can, let the Selectmen know kind of how many new cases you have.
Sure. So, yeah, I'm here. So we had quite an uptick of new cases. If you've seen the result, 28 new ones. And the reason for that is, as you may know, Governor Baker is heading a pretty strong campaign to test people in long-term care facilities. And over 70% of the new cases we got came from long-term care facilities. So that was where the big uptick came from in the latest report as far as numbers. You can go down. I mean, that's also represented in the age breakout. If you look at that, the over 70 is 30 people right now in the over 70. So that's kind of the explanation of where the numbers came from this time.
Thanks. It's concerning with the elderly living communities, and I do know that there are some groups that have been moving some people around to try to make kind of COVID-19 only places elsewhere, and moving some of the patients that they didn't think had COVID-19 into Westborough. And I'm just trying to figure out if there's anything that we can do formally to prevent that from continuing to happen. Because right now, with the governor's kind of stay-in-place order, it's concerning that that groups are encouraging people to move around, especially in high-risk communities. I don't know if, Alan, you were cited.
Yeah, so I don't think move around is really what's happening at this point. What's happening at this point is, as people are discharged from hospitals, where they go is based on whether their hospitalization has been related to COVID-19 or not. And I do know that many people in the hospital who are in for non-COVID-19 related reasons are getting tested anyhow for one reason or another. So what would be coming to Westborough, based on my understanding of things, is people who, in fact, are believed not to have COVID-19. So I'm not, so I'm not worried that there's an ongoing movement of people in long-term care facilities to our detriment. I do have a question for Steve. Have you reviewed protocols with all of the long-term care facilities about their staff in terms of checking temperatures and doing other things that are common in healthcare facilities?
Yeah, I have, and DPH is on top of this too. So each long-term care facility, at least the couple I've dealt with here, when I look at the notes in Maven, there's a DPH epidemiologist who has taken notes in there, and so they're on top of that.
When you say they're on top of that, it doesn't quite give me the information about, yes, the facilities are in fact monitoring their employees to make sure they are not the ones spreading the infection.
Well, correct. I mean, they screen. Those facilities are pretty much on lockdown right now anyway, my understanding is. So employees going in there, they're screened, temperature screened before they go in, and also background, asking if they've had symptoms in the last 48 hours, that type of thing, which I think is standard protocol for all those facilities.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that was the case and be explicit. Thank you.
Yep.
I do think that there's a number of studies out so far that indicate there's a lot of asymptomatic people that do carry the COVID-19 disease, or that do have the coronavirus. And for those people, they might pass the screening measures that are being used. And in fact, I think when the National Guard was testing, they did find some healthcare workers at the facilities here in Westborough that did have, that did test positive for the coronavirus. So even though we're doing our best efforts to identify all of the healthcare workers by screening temperature and asking about symptoms, that still is not a foolproof plan to protect, a really vulnerable population. I'm not coming up with a better suggestion, but I mean, the tools that we have are temperature screening and asking about symptoms. And the other thing is just increasing the amount of testing. And I think that the National Guard has done a lot more testing, so that part is positive.
Dr. Walsh?
Oh, you first, Shelby.
I just want to share that every facility that our business goes into with our caregivers, all caregivers are required to utilize varying levels of PPE. So I'm certainly familiar with, I know that that's a something that's been encouraged from the feds on down, but just so you know that if you have healthy workers going into those facilities, they are being asked to protect themselves, and all that screening is absolutely taking place.
So, Dr.
Lee, just mute. Lee, off.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. A comment and a question. It's somewhat reassuring to hear that 70% of the 28, which was such a big increase, came mostly from people in long care facilities. But I hope that doesn't make families think, oh, I don't have to worry. It's not out in the community with school-age kids and teenagers and families. It doesn't mean that we can in any way let down our guard on doing our social distancing and not traveling. So I just wanted to make that comment. And then I wondered, do we know if all of our grocery stores now are not allowing you in unless you have a mask? And then my other question was, do we know if the long care term facilities do have enough protective equipment now?
Okay, so as far as the long-term care facilities, I'm not aware of any problems, but I'm not, quite honestly, I'm not in contact with them on a daily basis, but the ones I have talked to, they haven't expressed that problem. As far as the grocery stores, I don't know if they're actively enforcing the mask. We'll have to check on that, Lee.
I can answer that, Steve. So no, you can get into a grocery store without a mask right now. And honestly, until you just asked the question, I didn't know that, although it was advised, I certainly didn't know it was mandated. And my understanding is that the mask is helped to mitigate when keeping less than 6 feet apart becomes difficult. But I think all the grocery stores, and I go to all of them, they are, I think they're taking active measures to help with that. Many of them have their aisles one way, so that people aren't crossing each other, and you can keep a distance behind somebody and things like that. So, and I do see probably more than half the people in the grocery stores with masks, but I think it would be, unless you're going to have masks available to people when they walk into the store to put on, I think it may be unrealistic. People need to buy food, and if they don't, not everybody has access to masks. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so I think there are some towns that have gone with restrictions that are much more significant than what Westborough has. I know that I think Beverly and maybe Salem, to name a few, do have restrictions in place where you have to wear some sort of face covering while out in public or when you're entering grocery stores or going to essential businesses. There are other places that have closed all their parks and parking lots, and so it's nice for us to kind of just assess what other people are doing to make sure that where we are is where we want to be. I think that we've got a pretty responsible set of population here, and so I'm hoping that we don't need to go too draconian in terms of our measures. But it is nice to be kind of aware of what some communities are doing. Christy, it looks like you have something you want to say.
Yeah, I was just going to say that in terms of PPE for the long-term care facilities, I know that Chief Purcell has been working with them, and he's able to help them as our emergency management director get PPE.
Nathan?
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
So not for this meeting, but not to add to Steve's already large plate, but this discussion brings up a point that a lot of the at least I believe 41 grocery workers have either got infected with COVID-19. So I'm just wondering, and again, I don't want to add to Steve's work, but I think just like we are doing with the building department, there's a checklist. I'm wondering if we can at least ask our major grocery stores, what is their current protocols? Do they have protocols? If they do have protocols, what is the protocol for evacuation if someone tests positive? Is the town, I recognize that their, quote unquote, their town is going to be the town that the worker resides in. That Board of Health gets notified if the worker tests positive, but will the Board of Health in Westborough be notified? And so I think it may be helpful to just have that discussion if the rest of the board members agree.
So I think in general, when somebody with a communicable disease is infected, typically in a non-COVID-19 environment, Maven, I think, tracks where they work, and they let both the town where they're working, if there's potential for an epidemiological outbreak occurring, would let that town know, as well as the hometown where the person resides. In this day and age, though, I think that you can get overwhelmed pretty easily, and I'm not sure that just keeping up with the cases that we already have is already challenging. So maybe Steve can talk a little bit to it, but I'm not positive that we would get notified every time someone in another town that works here in Westborough is being identified.
No, well, we don't, but we get quite a few calls from places that have found out that their employees may have tested positive, asking for advice, and we certainly go over with them what the protocol should be. I had one just before this meeting. A place called me, so while it's not while we don't get every instance, we are getting some of it, and of course we're there to tell them what needs to be done when they reach out to us.
Right, but is it worthwhile in this because I mean, they're the one place that is open where all of us are congregating. In the interest of the town, the residents of not only just the residents but the workers that are working there, is it worthwhile just at least asking them, what are what protocols are you following? I mean, like with the building department.
Excuse me, Nathan.
Sorry.
Excuse me, Nathan. This is Ray.
Hey, Ray.
I've been out, Aaron and I have been out to all the grocery stores, and they do have precautions in place. They do have protocols. They had them in before we started going out to all the construction sites. So they are already following that, and they have everything they've been doing. They're doing PPE and all that stuff. So I just wanted, because I know Syed asked that question first, I just want to make sure I answered that.
Okay.
When you say they're
that's
doing
what I was looking for.
PPE, are you saying that like all of the cashiers are using face masks, or
They have the ability to. They have ability to wear them. The like Roach Brothers, they have them. They don't have masks, but they told people if they want to wear masks, they can bring them themselves. Gloves, they're providing gloves to everybody who wants to wear them. They have sanitizer at every single station. So that's how they're handling it. Because there was nothing that said they definitely had to wear gloves and masks. It just said they were advised to, or they were, it was, and that's how they're handling it. So I've gone in and probably 90% of the employees are wearing something.
Yeah, I was going to say also, at Roach Brothers, almost everybody, certainly all the cashiers were wearing masks, and many of the people stocking shelves and whatnot were doing so as well.
If I may, the governor, I believe it was 5 days ago, issued specific instructions to grocery stores that include specific distancing requirements, sanitation requirements, and other procedures that they need to have in place.
Yeah, part of those also was occupancy, 40%, I think it was of.
Yeah.
So there are specific requirements for grocery stores.
In addition, I believe the governor declared that grocery store workers were considered in the same group as first responders for access to special testing sites. So there's no barrier to them, if they don't feel right, finding out if they have COVID-19.
Correct. In looking at the order here, grocery store workers no longer need to have symptoms. Simply requesting to their manager that they want to be tested. The appointment can be made at Foxborough or at the Big E, either of those two locations.
I'd just like to say too to that. I mean, I think it's all the work that the town department, Steve and Ray and Aaron are doing. Thank you. First off, you guys are heroes in my eyes. A lot of people. The work that you guys are doing is phenomenal and nonstop, and thank you for doing that. But I guess I go out to our community. Is we also have to ask them. People have to be smart. There are rules being put in place. We're asking the stores. We've asked others to do this. Talk about healthcare workers, and absolutely, it's the right thing to do. But once again, for folks, if you're in the store, you're in the store to get things. Stay away from others. Get what you need. Get out. Use precautions, help out. Don't expect the store to, do it all for you. We all have to take responsibility here. That's how we're all going to get through that. So it's just really reminding folks to do that. If you go to Roach Brothers and the parking lot looks really full, maybe you can, if you have the opportunity, maybe you can come back at a later time too.
I think that's well said. Thank you. From the Board of Health, is there anything else that we feel like we want to cover today rather than postponing toward our normal meeting next week?
Yeah, just Nathan, it's just one other thing. I know that Steve is working closely with the school nurses, so I'm just and this maybe, I don't know if they know this or not, but I know we had stopped our vaccination clinic. Do you know of the vaccination schedules for measles, mumps, and rubella? Is that still continuing or not? Do you know?
No. People aren't allowed in the town hall right now, and so we're not doing that right now. As soon as we can assemble again, we'll start that up again. But right now we're.
Yeah, I figured as much. Okay.
Yeah, but we'll be ready when it comes time where we can have people in the offices again.
As far as the nurses, Steve, I just wanted, maybe you can comment on how they're working out. I assume that they've been a huge boost and that we're really grateful to them, but it's nice to hear you say that.
Yeah, I can't thank them enough. Judy Noonan and her whole crew there have taken a huge load off of me as far as helping with the contract tracing. I've actually been able to do some other stuff non-COVID this week. So that was, I can't thank them enough, and Amber and the whole school department for helping me out with that. It has been a huge lift and is a huge asset to the community. So thank you again.
And so the other thing that came up was just an update on construction sites to see which ones are still operating and which ones are, shut down at this point?
Okay. I was out today. I went out with Fred on a few different places. Most of the construction sites have shut down. Fred and I shut one down today because they weren't complying. But right now we have Phil's school is in compliance, doing everything they need to do, and Pulte Construction is in compliance. We did have to shut down the Burger King site.
Okay, good. And then I think there was, Shelby, you had a question that you wanted to ask. It kind of flew by in the chat before I could read it all.
Yeah, no worries. I was just wondering if Steve, if you have an update on the state's support for contact tracing.
Yeah. So we did, for lack of a better word, apply to have. There's a group of I think 12 or 1,300 public health students that are ready to help boards of health. I applied for that. We're working our way through the process to get that set up. And also, I found out today, my understanding is there's another state group that might be doing some contact tracing too. It's really in its infancy, so I don't know a whole lot about that. But the resources are coming to help the boards of health with the huge undertaking of this. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a whole lot of help, and not only Westborough, but all throughout the state.
Steve, I know we've been asked in the past not to use acronyms, but sometimes we use contact tracing like it's something everyone should know. Could you just explain for those folks that are listening what that actually, what it comprises of?
Sure. So, you have we get notification of a positive case, right? So you have that person where you have to do an interview with, and based upon their onset of symptoms, you have to find out who they may have had contact with that they may have exposed. And that can go off in many different directions, from household contacts to workplace contacts, or even other family members that might have visited during the time where they were symptomatic or within their infectious period. And then those people have to be quarantined and called on a couple times a week to see how their symptoms are. So depending upon the case, it can get, you could easily have 5, 6, 7, 8 different contacts that come out from one positive case that you have to keep track of. So you can see how it can get very cumbersome very quickly, especially when you involve workplaces, things like that.
Thank you.
So to the public that's listening, if you keep down the number of contacts that you have, it makes our job at the Board of Health a lot easier. So keep your contacts down. And that way, if somebody that you happen to know does come up with a positive COVID-19 test, it just becomes easier to make sure that we can address everybody that the person's come in contact with.
And for what it's worth, again, for people who may be listening in and this is new to them, this is standard protocol for many types of infectious diseases. If we were dealing with a measles outbreak, we'd be doing the exact same thing.
So I think, Ian, we might be done with the Board of Health portion, unless there's someone else from the Board of Health that has anything. So we're ready to hand that back over to you, I think.
Okay. If you want to, you guys are willing to stay on, but you can also adjourn your meeting. Is fine too as we move on with the Board of Selectmen's meeting.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Okay, I second that motion. We'll do it by roll call. Dr. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Dr. Hashman?
Yes.
Dr. Walt? Yes. So our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everyone at the Board of Selectmen, and thanks everyone who's listening.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, so moving along on the Board of Selectmen agenda. I didn't go through the agenda prior. It was posted online, but we're going to jump right in. We're actually pretty much right on time, which is great. But we have a kind of a double here for discussion vote on the review of the Green Community Competitive Grant application, and as well as a discussion vote on the community choice aggregation structure. So I'm not sure who's taking the lead here from Sustainable Westborough, but I would turn it over at this point.
Hi,
Pete Dunbeck is here.
Okay.
Yep, this is Pete Dunbeck.
And Cheryl, I'm here too.
And are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
No, I see you.
I see Cheryl and I see Pete.
Okay.
I don't see your screen. I don't see your screen yet, Pete. Now we are. Yep. Now we do.
Okay, very good. So thank you for the chance to speak to you again. I'm here representing both Sustainable Westborough and the Climate Action Plan Task Force. And there's really three topics we're going to be discussing. The Green Community Program has a competitive grant, and we're going to be requesting permission to submit that on behalf of the town. And Cheryl will lead us through that discussion. In regard to the Climate Action Plan, the task force has reviewed our program and come up with a governance document and a work plan, and I wanted to brief you on that. And then finally, we had talked to you last month about the community choice aggregation, and both committees have taken a vote and made a recommendation that I wanted to put on the table before you. So for the green communities, the last time we talked about green communities, we were discussing the designation grant. So as you all know, we received the green community designation, and with that, we received $152,000 of funds. The funds were spent last year in 2019 on weatherization of 8 different buildings and LEDs for the DPW. There were a couple of projects that we had anticipated using to invest that money in, including EV charging stations and some training for the building operators certification. Those were deferred in order to allow us to complete all of the designation spending in 2019. And having completed that successfully and getting the state to sign off for it, we're now eligible to apply for what's considered a competitive grant. And as the name implies, it is competitive. We'll be submitting our request for grant money along with other towns, and Cheryl will lead us through that discussion, and we'll be asking for your support on that. So Cheryl, Thomas from Sustainable Westborough is going to be leading this discussion.
Thanks, Pete. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us. So I'll just present a very basic summary of the grant application. You got a copy, but I'll give you a brief overview, and if you have any questions, you can ask in a minute. So the projects we came up with through consulting with the building directors, Jim Stewart and Bob Ferguson, and they indicated that they were interested in having interior LED lighting upgrades for the schools. They were eager to get that done. So we went ahead and applied for those projects for Armstrong Elementary, the Town Hall, the Senior Center, and the Fire Station. And then there's one more project, which isn't actually a project. It's asking the state for $10,000 toward 2 hybrid police cruisers, assuming those are approved at town meeting, whenever that may be. So the grant total, we could ask for up to $200,000 in grant money. The projects ended up being a little smaller, so we're actually applying for about $154,000 in grant money. So how that works is the LED project costs, the grant covers a portion of it, and hopefully, and the utility incentives we get cover the rest. So Westborough comes out without any cost for doing the LED upgrades, ideally. But like Pete said, this is a competitive situation, so it doesn't mean that the state will approve all of the projects we ask for. They may approve some of them, all of them. We don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. If they don't approve a project, then we'll just take it out of the scope of work. Thanks. So the town this time is not adding any matching funds to the grant. It could be an issue for us, but these projects are kind of smaller projects. So what we've done instead is we're careful to include in our narrative all of the efficiency-related projects the town has recently done or is doing. So here are some of them on the list of major EE projects. Those are quite extensive. So We've called a lot of attention to these in our grant narrative so that the state understands that Westborough is really committed to meeting our 5-year energy plan reduction plan goals. So summarizing the projects, the LED projects, and all of the projects that Westborough has recently finished or is doing, we have some projected annual energy reduction and emissions reductions, which around 10% for each. And then just doing the LED upgrades and the hybrid vehicles, there's some numbers here for electricity savings and gasoline savings. And then, so what are the next steps in terms of the grant? We need to get the town chief executive officer signature and actually submit the application, which Pete will do online through the state website. Then we receive our response from them. Then the project should be completed. We're saying that they'll be completed by the end of this year. And then a final report has to be created and submitted to the state. So those are the steps. And then it's important just to mention for the responsible parties, we'll have to pay attention to the project's continuity. They're not very big projects, a few days each, so it wouldn't be difficult. And then just that the vehicles are dependent on town meeting vote. So if that ends up in the air, that's fine. We'll just have to take it out of the project.
So thank you, Cheryl. And just on that last point, so the state is used to having projects which are contingent on town meeting votes. So that would not be a barrier being recipient of the grant. It's just that we won't get the grant money, of course, unless the town votes to pay our fair share of the vehicles or the balance of the vehicles. So with this overview of the documents and the documents you were sent, do you have any questions in regard to our application for this?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. This is Ian. I don't have any. I'll open up to the board for that, or I would also ask for a motion on this application proposal.
Make the motion. So I move to approve the Green Community Grant application as presented.
Is there a second?
Second, Lee Emery.
And are there questions or any comments?
Not a question. I just want to thank Cheryl so much. She's fairly new to our committee or our task force, and she has done a tremendous amount of work and really helped unburden Pete, who did the bulk of it last time, and she's just a wonderful. And then I think Grim also helped a lot.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, Cheryl did a great job, and I'd also follow up with Mike Grimm and Eileen Nicopolis. Were key contributors in the work also. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, it's Syed Hashmi.
Yep.
So to echo what everyone has said, incredible job. So I just want to be clear, potentially because we're all looking at our capital expenses, and so the impact to the town should be negligible. Am I getting that correct? If we get the grant, asking the taxpayers, we won't have to ask a lot. Am I getting that? Am I correct in that impression?
So let me just go to this slide. So for the LED projects, the cost would be zero. So the combination of the grant money and the National Grid incentives cover the entire cost of the project. So we would not be proposing going forward with the LED projects unless we receive the grant. And with the grants, it's no cost to the town. The police cruisers, it's a question of the chief of police's position on which cruisers to buy. But after review of the hybrid police cruisers and the energy savings, the gasoline savings, I think he was quite enthused about this. In addition, we can get $5,000 per cruiser for grant money. So what his decision is on the purchase of the cruisers if we didn't get the grant money isn't clear to me. but for the LED projects, I would assume we wouldn't go forward until next year.
So just to expand on that, so the purchase of the police cruisers is on the capital plan, and so we are reviewing all the capital requests while in review of the warrant. So if we decided not to move forward with one of them, we would just let Sustainable Westborough know, or if town meeting didn't approve them, what Cheryl was saying was that they just wouldn't get the money for those.
Thank you.
And Ian, this is Selectman Emmerich. Just looking at the numbers, it appears that the $5,000 per vehicle would cover the cost difference between a traditional SUV cruiser and the hybrid.
Yes,
So
that's the intent.
That's the intent. So that the intent is to go hybrid without an impact on the taxpayers.
With a positive impact, actually, because
you save fuel and
as shown here, we're estimating you'll save almost $4,000 a year in fuel.
Okay, excellent, because that's close to 12,000
cost, but the savings going forward.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments?
This is Shelby. I just want to thank everyone for their work on this. It's very exciting, sort of uplifting in this time that we're in to see other projects going forward that are really meaningful and have long-term positive impact for the community. So thank you, Cheryl, Pete, and the entire green community.
Thank you. And I just did want to comment one thing, which is that as a town moving forward, we should pay attention to any and every opportunity we have for improving our environmental impact into our long-term planning, our short-term planning, and our medium-term planning. So these grants are just a way to kind of address some pretty limited projects, but projects that probably wouldn't otherwise be done. So anything you think of that you have on your radar, just pass the word along, and we can always consider them for the following year's grants.
Yeah, I view these as sort of low-hanging fruit, and it gets tougher as we go forward.
Yeah, and go ahead, Ian.
No, if you have someone on this, Pete, I was going to call.
I was just going to say our intent would be to complete these projects by the end of the calendar year, so that we could then be on the cycle next year to apply again. So I think there'd be a good chance of being in the loop for applying for another competitive round next year.
Great. Thanks, Pete. Okay, I'm going to call for a vote, roll call vote. And since you spoke last, Selectman Marshall, I'll let you vote first.
Oh, thank you. Marshall, yes.
Selectman Edinburgh?
Edinburgh, yes.
Selectman Hashmi?
Yes.
Selectman Emery?
Of course. Thank you.
Selectman Johnson, yes. So that passes, and we'll move that forward, and thanks again. So now turning you to your second one and climate action.
This is really the first report from the Climate Action Plan Task Force. We have had 3 meetings and have spent a lot of time studying what other towns have done on similar endeavors to create a climate action or sustainability plan. And after those meetings and our internal review and debate of the wording of the town meeting warrant article and our belief of what the goals were and how we should govern ourselves, we drafted the governance document that was sent to you, and it's shown some on the screen here. I would like to take a minute and just look at the high-level statement in the charter statement. The overarching goal of the task force is to create a climate action plan, but that the climate action plan's goal is to dramatically and continuously reduce greenhouse gas emissions over the next 30 years. And the wording was selected because continuously was selected to imply that although the overall reduction is over 30 years, the changes can't wait. There's an urgency in moving our greenhouse gases down as quickly as possible, and dramatically to say we need to get as close to zero as possible. And the purpose of the document itself, the Climate Action Plan, is to define actions, a set of actions for the town community-wide. And so there are key parts there were action-oriented and it's community-wide. And it's not just the municipal government use of fossil fuels and creating emissions. Within that is the issues associated with the Global Warming Solutions Act, which are cited in the two bulleted items. The current Global Warming Solutions Act objectives are 80% reduction by 2050 and 40% by 2030. However, as you may be aware, the governor in the State of the Commonwealth address in January stated that and declared that the state should achieve a net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So the parenthetic phrase is alluding to that. The administration is running public hearings and doing evaluation on a 2050 decarbonization roadmap, which will refine and change the state goals, and those will be set by both the goals and the policies and procedures around it by the end of 2020. So in parallel with what we're doing on the Climate Action Plan Task Force, the state is increasing the intensity or increasing the urgency of immediate action on this. And our expectation is that it'll be a net zero by 2050 goal, and that the 2030 goal will be stricter than the 40% shown here. So through the year, we will keep you up to date on that changing goal. The last point, again, just to emphasize that the Climate Action Plan will be designed to address all sectors of the Westborough economy, municipal, residential, industrial, and commercial sources of greenhouse gas emissions, and from different, like building, heating and cooling, transportation, electric supply, and potentially others like land use and municipal waste. For this meeting, I was hoping to have some initial greenhouse gas baseline emissions, but the work that's being led by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC, on developing tools and developing databases for support of that has been delayed by a month. So we have some preliminary information, but I don't have enough that I wanted to publish details. But the preliminary information was enlightening to me, and I want to highlight at this time that the commercial and industrial sector in Westborough is much larger than the residential in regard to greenhouse gas emissions. And therefore, in this climate action plan, we will need to consider the importance of that sector and develop strategies in partnership with the business community for how to address that. Many of the leading businesses have already taken pretty aggressive stance, so it'll be a discovery process for us to understand what's already underway. But I wanted to highlight that it's not just residential uses that we need to focus on, and also point out municipal is actually quite a small slice. It's only about 5% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So on the kind of the governance document, the charter and so forth, do you have any questions? I did want to talk a little about the work plan, but just on the kind of our goals and what we believe we are trying to achieve, is this what you want us to be working on?
You open up to the board for comments.
Yes.
Name of the board.
This is Selectman Edinburgh. I believe this is spot on.
Yep.
Very good, Alan. Did everybody get a chance to read the, I think it was a 3-page document that Pete sent?
Yes.
Okay.
That was in our packet.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it was concise and very nicely laid out. We had, who was it that helped the most on that, Pete and the committee?
Peter Flynn and Andy Konigsberg were the primary people that went back and forth on that.
Right. So they worked with Pete. So I want to thank them they really made a very clear, concise document.
Great. Anything else from the board?
Just has this or will this be posted for public visibility?
It will be. One of the issues we haven't addressed is kind of having a web presence, getting a page on the town website where we can be publishing this. But yes, that is needed.
Okay, I think we can help out with that.
Right,
Yes.
and just remember that this is the Climate Action Plan, not Sustainable Westborough. So creating the website is really part of our beginning efforts. We've done a lot in the last 2 months, and that's one of the next big steps for the group to take on.
Yeah,
So
sorry, I was just going to say this is a great piece of work, a great foundation for us as a town to begin to work from. And it's got some lofty goals, but it's impressive. So thank you.
Great.
Okay, well, let me talk a little about the work plan. And was there something else?
No, I was going to say you were good to go, so you beat me to it.
Okay. So it is a lot of work, and so we've started putting some thought into how to get it done and what are the steps of the process. And there was an Excel file that was sent out, which has kind of expanded version of what you're looking at on the screen. We are just in the wrap-up phase of what we called our foundation, which is that governance document in this plan, and unfortunately the greenhouse gas inventory, which wasn't completed. The next phase is to basically go into an open program of brainstorming and collecting strategies. There's a lot of work that's been done in other towns that we can learn from. We're also building a network with other towns doing this work, Natick and Arlington in particular, to build out basically a large pool of ideas that we're calling an inventory of strategies, and then using that to apply a filter against that, a criteria to filter that into what we consider the candidates for the final document. With the candidates, we'll develop a briefing package on each of the strategies and take that in section E to get community feedback, including this board and others. With that feedback, we'll finalize the list, potentially adding new strategies, but also refining the strategies that we had selected, which will then go into the end of the year. We'll have, by the end of the year, January 13th, we'll have a first draft of the completed Climate Action Plan document. And then we have 6 weeks planned for a document review to get your feedback as well as others, such that by the end of February, we'll have a signature draft ready for your approval, and to meet the goal of having the Climate Action Plan approved by annual town meeting of 2021.
Can I ask a question, Pete?
Yes.
Sort of two-part. I guess my recollection is that we don't have any money or paid resources, committed to helping us like at a consultant level to vet this plan. Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, unfortunately now is probably not the time. I don't mean this meeting, but I just mean the timing of what's going on. But as we worked through this plan and we're getting through it, I know we've got a tremendous amount of resources and lessons learned from other communities, and your group has done a lot of work there and will continue to do so. But we should consider whether or not we should have some professional expertise, if you will, look at this before it's submitted for approval, and ultimately, I presume, has to be approved by the Board of Selectmen or town meeting.
Shelby, may I make a comment that might help clarify what strategy means? I think you may remember at town meeting and in several Board of Selectmen's meetings, we told the public that we aren't going to come up with actual actions like you have to do this to get to here. What we're going to come up with is strategies. So a simple example might be that we might say that it would be a strategy to have all school children be 50% of a school population be able to walk to school, because that would have an impact on your busing costs, your busing emissions. But it wouldn't say how you would do that, because you'd have to engage DPW, you'd have to talk to the schools, you'd have to talk to parents, you'd have to assess, do they live within walking distance at school or out at Mill Pond? So I think that may help you when you're thinking about having a consultant come in, because we might not actually be ready for that at this level, but I would defer to Pete and what he thinks about your question.
I had a discussion with VHB about the question you've just asked, and I think that it may be possible to get for what doesn't seem like a lot of money to me. I'll just leave it at that. I think we could get some help by inviting them into the process. Maybe in the community feedback phase, they could be an outside feedback source for, a few days of work from VHB that would be valuable.
And just for everyone's benefit, VHB is the consultant that's working on with our master planning committee.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and Lee, thank you very much for explaining the strategy piece. That example was helpful, because other professional input might be required as those strategies are considered within the various groups or interested parties in town.
Yeah, and further on that, kind of what is a strategy, we've started a template of what goes into the briefing package for D, and there will be ownership, which I think is a key issue. Who is owning that strategy, and future tasks that will be needed, and there'll be contingency that maybe all of those tasks don't. Maybe there's budget required. Maybe there's a town meeting vote required. So not every strategy is going to be totally in the control of the town government. It should be prescriptive and action-oriented, although it's forward-looking, so it may have contingencies that may not play out as we'd hoped. If that makes sense.
Great, thanks, Pete. Other questions from the board? Or comment?
I just had one further slide on this. It kind of ties into the previous slide. So we are doing this update today. One of the points I wanted to emphasize, and a concern, is that when I looked at some of the other towns, some of the other towns did great documents, and some of them sat on the shelf for 8 or 10 years, literally. And so I wanted to make sure that we're not creating a document that's going to sit on the shelf. So I want to make sure that it's integrated into your thought process and the leadership of the town, so that we're developing a document that's going to be useful and used, and that it is, when approved, a commitment of the town to the plan. It's not a thank you, you've done your job, now we'll put this on the shelf, but in fact the town is committing to the plan. So I want to have an iterative communication with you that we're going in the direction you want us to be going in. or we'll take the feedback that we're not, and we'll have that discussion. So the cadence here is April, we're doing this update now. We will brainstorm and develop the list of candidate strategies. I don't think we need to sit down and have another discussion like this. We can email that to you, take whatever feedback. But by September, have a presentation with the complete briefing package for that list of candidate strategies. And then go through the public process between September and December, come up with the final list, which is just going to be a refined version of the previous one, and come back in January with the first draft of the document. Again, it's a document for review, so we do expect to have changes, but then by the end of February to have a document we submit to you for approval on the, I believe, March 9th Board of Selectmen meeting. So those would be what I would consider our key touch points to ensure that we're aligned with the board over time.
And Pete, thank you for that. I think that is the way you've outlined it, and the committee has outlined this is, I think, is spot on and great, because I think your comment is, the task that you were giving, it would be a waste of all your time if what came out of here was a document that sat on the shelf. I think it's a commitment. I think you spelled it out and heard, at least tonight, from the board of the support for the charter and the overarching. I think personally, I look forward to seeing the initial candidate list and the details around that. But I think it is something that we, as well as the town departments, will take on and to work towards fulfilling this, and that making the commitment that this doesn't just become a document that sits on the shelf. So thank you. Other comments from the board or questions? Great. So Pete, thank you for that. And let's go to the last piece, which is the community choice aggregation.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the time. I'm going beyond my time slot, so let me be quick here. We had reviewed the community choice aggregation with you recently and had put forward a model of having a 3-tier model for the community choice contract, which is due for that we're planning to sign in the next months. We reviewed this with, first we reviewed this with the Climate Action Plan Task Force, as well as Sustainable Westborough, and took votes on resolutions basically endorsing this 3-tier model. And we are asking for, in those letters and in those resolutions, that the board adopt and direct the town manager to work with the consultants to put in place that 3-tier model. And in the center paragraph is a key. So the first paragraph is about the 3-tier model. Second one is with a green default. The second paragraph, we believe, based on the analysis of the existing contract and our understanding of the energy market today, that we can exceed the state minimum by 20 to 30% while holding the electric cost impact to less than 5% a year. There was a chart there I flipped by. If it is 20% and the costs are similar to what we are expecting, it's in fact under 3%. So our recommendation is to try to keep it under 5%, and we believe the town could get a 20 to 30% additional renewable energy above the state minimum. This is a primary tool that towns have for impacting the greenhouse gas emissions from their communities, and the timing of this is excellent for us as we're trying to come out with a strong first step on the climate action plan. And again, both of the environmental committees have voted in support of this model. So we're asking for your support of that.
Great. Thank you, Pete.
And I think Christy's been involved with this thought process too, so she might want to comment.
Thanks. And Christy, anything?
No, I mean, the board has already voted to authorize me to sign the contract, but this is a different structure than we've had in the past. So we have had a couple meetings, and the board had initially asked that Shelby be a part of that. So she has been also part of this work. And so I think tonight we're just asking that the board take a vote related to the structure.
This is Shelby. One of the things I do think that's important to point out is I think that this is the best of sort of all worlds. The default to the green increases our reduction in greenhouse gases, a minimum household cost of electricity increase. Those that want to opt up for a cleaner option have the option to do so, and those that want to opt down to a minimum and a slightly lesser expensive option have that option. And we had extensive discussion with the Sustainable Westborough in the meetings that Christy was referring to talk about the importance of how we'll educate the community on the plan and what to do and why this is a really safe plan for folks to opt into versus other sort of independently marketed plans that may take folks for a ride.
Great. Thanks, Shelby. I'd entertain a motion from the board.
Sure. I move to structure the community choice aggregation to include 3 tiers: a basic option with no additional renewables, a greener option with some renewables, and a greener still option with more renewables, and to set the default at the middle tier with some renewable energy.
Secondly.
Okay. And I think that really is in line with what was put in front of us here is exactly what the board is endorsing. So that would be in line with the resolutions endorsed already and that Pete submitted and explained here. Other comments or questions?
This is Selectman Emmer. My only comment will be just as the committees have done a great job of keeping us informed with where they are in these projects in this initiative, the plan for public education would be great to, as that's put together, to at least share that with the board so that we can support and help participate in that. Because the success of this program really will depend on how well the public and our residents understand the benefits of, staying on that central tier with the option if finances dictate going to the lower tier.
Yeah, so we had a detailed discussion at the Sustainable Westborough meeting and spent about 20 minutes discussing the education and awareness plan and getting people working on a subcommittee for that goal. So I'm in tune with the importance of that and would be happy to bring back a plan in the months ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. Other comments? Okay, if not, a roll call vote. I'm going to go down what I'm looking at here on my screen. So, Selectman Emery, you're first.
Oh, yes.
Selectman Edinburgh.
Yes.
Selectman Marshall.
Yes.
Selectman Hashmi.
Yes.
And Selectman Johnson, yes. So that's 5-0, 5 being present. Endorsement. Again, thank you very much.
Well, thank you all. Appreciate your support.
Appreciate all the hard work and look forward to continued interactions.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great. So moving ahead, next thing on the agenda is really a discussion of the vote taken at our last meeting to defer tax bill and exemption applications deadline to June 1st and waiver of interest until June 30th, 2020. And just pulling it up here. So, Chris, I don't know if you want to speak. Do you want me to go through this? I surprised you there, so I can go through it if you want.
It doesn't matter to me. This is just to discuss and actually have an agenda item that reflects the vote that you took at your last meeting, which was a vote that was authorized under recent legislation that the governor put into effect to help with impacts of COVID-19. So the vote was to defer tax bill due dates to June 1st, defer exemption applications to June 1st, and then also to waive any interest accrued for late payment as long as the bill is paid by June 30th of 2020. So we did take that vote at the last meeting, and it has been advertised to the community. The DOR had specified sort of a template, which we put out to the community. It's also been put on the electronic signboards, and it was included in Chief Purcell's code red on Sunday.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And this really was just put on again, as you said. We took the vote at the last meeting right after the legislation came through, but it's really just to educate folks and remind folks. So if there are questions, you can reach out to the Selectmen's office. But hopefully this is again a little bit to help folks in these difficult times. With that, I'm going to move right on to the next item, which is somewhat similar. So this is discussion vote on dog licensing fees. Christy?
So this was actually an item that the town clerk had asked me to put on, and I see that she's still on the meeting. So I know that they were looking at the board's approval to waive dog licensing fees. So through the same date until June 1st. Wendy, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I just, we were just kind of looking at the numbers, which are high this year for the licensing. Usually it's about 2,000 dogs. And by this time, so there's 1,365 that are licensed. And we're guessing about maybe 5% of them haven't updated their rabies, and that's why they haven't licensed. And I don't know, there may be issues too with paying for the rabies, getting the shot. I know the vets, a lot of them are on less hours if they're open at all. So there may be some issues with that. And the others that just haven't licensed their dog, I mean, that's usual, but maybe some are people that just can't do it right now for whatever reason, we're out. So I don't know if you want to extend it to June 1st, that we won't charge a late fee. And I know Melinda, the dog officer, said she wants to just get calling the people to find out what the issues are.
Yeah, so I should correct. I said dog licensing fees, but it would be late fees.
Late fees, yeah.
We're really waiving right now. We would be in the situation where we'd be charging them not just their license fee, but a late fee. This is asking similar to what we did with other ones, just to waive those fees. I think you're asking until June 1st.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Lee Emery. I move to authorize the town clerk to waive all late fees for dog licenses until June 1, 2020.
Marshall, second.
A second from Selectman Marshall. She beat you to it, Selectman Edinburgh. Any comments or questions on this one?
I would just add that there's information on the website that you can and Wendy can speak to this too, but that you can do your dog license online and through the mail. So even though town hall is closed, you're still able to do that.
Yes.
Perfect.
If they can, they should.
Yes, please do it that way.
Okay.
Question, actually, the third, could they also drop it in the box out front if they labeled it with the that it was for dog license? Is that possible as well?
Yeah, they can put it in the Dropbox.
Perfect. So a third option for folks. Mail online or the Dropbox. Okay, roll call vote. Selectman Marshall.
Marshall, yes.
Selectman Hashmi.
Yes.
Selectman Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, yes.
Selectman Emery. Oops. You're on mute, but I can read your lips. Shaking your head. So Selectman Emery was a yes, and Selectman Johnson, yes. So that's 5-0. Okay, next on the agenda is discussion on public engagement portion of staffing study. Back to you, Christy.
Yep. So as the board's aware, we approved the staffing study at the fall town meeting, and we engaged a consultant to do that work. And part of the RFP required a public engagement portion. So this consultant had put forward 2 options for public engagement. One was the online survey, which we launched about a month ago, or a little over a month ago, because it was before the COVID-19 crisis. And then the other piece was supposed to be focus groups. So we're hoping that we would still like to wrap this up. They had intended to wrap up the study in April. And so, given everything, it might actually be a little bit later than that, but so we've put forward a new option in lieu of the focus groups, which would be that we would the consultant would present a draft report, which we could post on the website and give people a week to review the draft report and provide comment, which could inform the final document. So we have had about 100 people participate in the online survey, which was taken down on Friday, and 4 businesses.
Chrissy, I would suggest that a week might be a little short because people aren't always paying attention to those sort of things on a daily basis. So if it's possible to give it a 2-week, I would suggest that.
I agree, Lee.
If I may, this is Selectman Edinburgh. I guess my one concern at this point, particularly with the relatively low business participation, is that the survey was made active a couple days before we started shutting down schools and shutting down businesses. And I think everyone's focus has been on their business, on their family, on their livelihood, on adapting. And I'm wondering if it might be worthwhile to open up the survey for another week where we as a town can highly promote it to see about getting some additional survey information up front that could then, feed the draft for public comment.
Alan, I think your comments about the timing of the survey are obviously spot on. What I actually was really pleasantly surprised at the input we did get with 99 and 4. So to be honest with you, I'm not sure, save for those that are watching tonight that say, oh my goodness, I didn't complete that and I own a business and I want to. I'm not sure that we're going to greatly increase the numbers. I do think that if we allow for a couple weeks for public feedback to Lee's suggestion, that then allows us to promote it and gives businesses who didn't participate a chance to engage at that point.
Okay.
Personally, I think anything we can do to ensure. I mean, it's difficult. We talked about this at the beginning. It was, as Christy said, something put in the RFP. We know that public input is important and in some ways imperative for these things. So whatever we can do there, I'm fine. Whichever way we go, I think 2 weeks sounds great to me in terms of giving enough time because things do get busy and just gives folks that time to do it. If the board decides they want an extra week of the survey being put up, I'd be fine with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it too. I don't think we should get our hopes up that we're going to get more, but I don't think it hurts, to Alan's point, to keep the survey, reposted and make sure we're promoting it and to get input. Likewise, I'd like to understand a little bit more about what will happen with the draft process, Christy. Is it a similar online, comment? Because that's where I think the extended period of time helps for folks to be able to sort of see, like, okay, I made my comments early, and now I'm going back a couple days later. People have commented, and now I can add to that. What is that process? I don't recall.
So that wasn't part of the original proposal. So right. This would be a new system. I don't know if they've specified if it would just be posted on the website and then the board would receive comments, or if there's a commenting forum. And Kim, I don't know if you know the answer to that question.
Sure. One of the things.
How's that?
Yep, you're on.
One of the the ways the consultant proposed we could handle this would be to post the draft report online and potentially have the ability for individuals to come to a selectmen's meeting and comment on it there. We're just trying to figure out timing wise. The consultant is close to wrapping up the report based on staff input. Many of the process and workflow recommendations have been heavily informed by the interview process with staff. So the remaining piece that they need to complete the report at this point is the, whatever form the public input takes. If it's, leaving it open and trying to get more surveys, the point at which the draft report is released, we're not sure if even at the end of May, June, the consultant's going to be able to come in, if they're doing the presentation remotely. They're open to suggestions, but what she offered was put the draft out and then allow folks to comment in a public hearing type of setting at a selectmen's meeting.
So Ian, if I may, I'm sorry, you're done?
Yeah. Go ahead, Shelby.
So I think it's great if we offer folks the opportunity to comment in a public forum. However, at whatever state we're in to do that. It might still be virtual, who knows? But I absolutely think it's imperative that we have the ability for folks to comment online between now and then. I think relying on folks to come to a selectmen's meeting we're just not going to get the turnout that, we would hope. So not unlike the survey that they put up, I think that they could post some sort of engagement board. Here's the document, comment on these sections, however they want to do that. I think they're a skilled firm, but online input should be required. And if we have to extend this timeline a little bit of the staffing study, we're under extreme circumstances, so I'm sure they would understand.
And Christy and Kim, if we just moved ahead and said, no more on the survey and draft report for comments, 2 weeks, I think was the consensus I've seen from the board. When do you think that draft report would be ready and would be up for public comment?
If we moved forward today without reopening the survey, we were expecting to have it before the end of the month.
So I think there's definitely stuff to be worked out in terms of how people would comment. I think it's fine if I think it makes sense to not just expect people to participate at a public meeting. In terms of that tool that they use for the survey, I don't know the relationship with that tool. So we'll have to just figure that out. But regardless, we can certainly, collect feedback through, through email as the most basic, sort of way to do it. So.
And I'm happy to help with a structure for allowing online comment and threaded discussion. So
the consultant has offered, they have the capacity. They said they're open to figuring out,
I think that would be
various options, and they have the capacity to help with that.
Okay.
So Alan, would you be okay if we go, instead of open up for the survey, let's move forward and focus on the draft report a little bit longer time and then work on the streaming?
So absolutely. My underlying concern is that, this report is going to inform future decisions that we make.
Yep.
And as we bring those forth, the ones that require review and approval by town meeting, I want, when we stand in front of town meeting, for there not to be a question that there was adequate public input. And that there's trust that the survey brought in all the necessary perspectives so that we're able to move forward with the initiatives that we see fit.
Perfect. Someone might want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I move to present a draft report on the website for a period of 2 weeks in order to receive public input in lieu of holding focus groups.
There's a second.
Second.
Lindbergh, any further comments or questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Selectman Emery. So Alan, are you concerned that if we don't reach out to more businesses and have them fill out the survey, that we'll go to town meeting and not be able to say there was adequate input because there's that section of our consumers really that haven't had a chance?
I'm comfortable that if we have a draft document up for 2 weeks with the ability to comment online, and for people to see each other's comments and take that into consideration, that we can, if we promote it to the business community, that we'd be able to solicit enough response to have the feedback we need. And then it's really up to the business community to decide how much they want to participate. But whether it doesn't have to be opening the survey up again, it can be reviewing the draft. So if that mechanism is available, that's convenient to business owners as well as residents. 2 weeks is plenty of time, and we'll leverage our skills in social media and our communication channels out to the business community to help get the word out so that they can take a look and provide comment if they want.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing there. Is it's really making sure that we, properly advertise it through all those channels, as you mentioned, Alan. I think that would be the good thing, so we get the comments back that we're looking for.
I would offer too that I think the ability to react to and comment on a report is probably easier than the focus group model. I think that, Shelby, we heard that when we were interviewing consultants, but it's hard for people to sort of get excited about staffing levels. And so to be able to really see what we're talking about and direct comment on those things, I think you'll get better public feedback.
Yeah, I agree. I'm wondering if the motion needs to be amended, or if we should give some thought to, we're going to rely on online input, which I think is great. Kirsty just said exactly why it's great. Do we need to plan for a time for public input at one of our meetings, and logistically, how might we do that? Because I'm presuming that if we post this by the end of this month, we'll still be probably in a somewhat virtual world, 2 weeks out or during that period. And I'll direct that at you.
Well, I'll answer for Ian. We've had to hold other public hearings, and that's really what we're talking about having. So, the planning board has held public hearings. So, we would just use the same software and we would be able to allow people to participate.
Yeah, I think we should do that. And I thank you for that, Shelby. Let's plan on that. I think we could do that at that first meeting in May, our first meeting in May, which would be, I think, within that 2 week window.
We actually just need clarification. We're going to get clarification from the consultant as to whether or not their intent is to present the draft at one of your meetings so that people can sort of hear about it, or if we would just put it up online and then they would present the final. So we just have to look at the contract and talk to them about schedules.
Okay.
I think that the former would be ideal, Christy. I think people have a chance to hear it, then it's posted, then they're commenting on it. That would be ideal, but we'll trust you to look at the contract.
Okay.
So I'll amend my original motion to be that I move to present a draft. We move to present a draft report on the website for a period of 1 week.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, sorry. And additionally, we'll identify time at a May Board of Selectmen meeting to receive public feedback in lieu of holding focus groups.
And Alan, you okay with that as a second?
Yes.
Okay. So roll call vote. Selectman Edinburgh?
Edinburgh, yes.
Selectman Emery?
Yes.
Selectman Marshall?
Yes.
Selectman Hashmi?
Yes.
And Selectman Johnson, yes. So 5-0. Thank you. So moving on to the presentation of estimated financial impact of COVID-19 crisis. What I'd like to ask you, I'm going to turn it to Christy, and the finance team has been doing a lot of work. There's still work to be done, so this is the start of work being done, and they'll explain that more. What I would request, if it's okay, is let's let Christy, and I'm not sure if Leah is going to be presenting as well, or whoever. Let's go through the presentation and then hold questions to the end if that works. I know when we did the finance team meeting yesterday, that worked best. So I'd like that if folks are okay. Let's go through what they have to present, which will both be on, I think, 2020, what we're looking at for the remainder of the year, and then going into 2021. And Christy, I guess I'll leave it to you. We may want to, if you think it's appropriate to talk and separate 2020 and 21 and have comments on 2020 first, we can do that. But whatever works best for you guys I'll let you decide.
Okay. Yeah, so Leah is also on the call, and I'm just going to share my screen here.
It worked before. There you go.
So I apologize if this didn't get in your packet. I actually didn't realize until I talked to Selectman Edinburgh today that the spreadsheet I sent you probably wouldn't show up very well on the screen for the public. So we did put together this presentation. But basically, with the COVID-19 impacts, we had to look at the FY20 budget in terms of our estimated revenue and what might be impacted by the closure of restaurants and hotel motels and other estimated revenue. And then we also looked at our FY21 budget because, as you know, that budget was ready for town meeting and had been, completed and as far as, voted on by the Board of Selectmen as well as the Advisory Finance Committee. And so understanding the impact of an estimated reduction in revenue, we certainly wanted to prepare for budget adjustments that would be needed so that we weren't having too big of an impact on the taxpayer in FY21. So we just want to be extremely clear that these estimates are based on information that we have as of today. As we know, this COVID crisis is there's a lot of unknowns, and so this is based on what we know as of today. In first looking at our revised revenue estimates, we did that for FY20. And so these are some of the things that I think Selectman Hashmi has been asking us to present. And these areas here you can see are really where we see a loss in fourth quarter revenue, which is our interest on taxes, our school revenue, administrative charges, other department revenue, hotel motel taxes, and meals taxes. And so our estimated shortfall for FY20 is $700,000. So what we did is, in looking at that number, is we did two things. So what we did, in thinking about that number in the current year, was I issued a budget memo on April 1st to all of the department heads, and we put on sort of a spending freeze where any expenditures that were above the $200 mark would need to go through an approval process. And this was really to sort of protect unexpended budgets. Obviously, there are larger expenditures related to responding to COVID-19 in some of our departments, but really putting on the spending freeze, letting departments know that we would need to be able to turn back unexpended budgets. And we know that there's unexpended budgets because we also know that a lot of our training and education and our conferences take place in the spring of the fiscal year. And obviously a lot of these things were canceled. So we looked through all of our departments and estimated what would be turned back. And in looking at that, we feel that we'll be able to make up that $700,000 in unexpended budgets. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about that, or if Leah, if you want to add anything to that before we move on to FY21.
Christy, I'm confused. I thought on the first slide I didn't see excise tax being short, but we think we'll make that up. Did I miss that? I'm looking at. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So all I was going to say about this is it's important to understand that 2020 is basically put to bed, right? We've set a tax rate and we're almost the way through the fiscal year. So these are just basically we're not actually changing any estimates. We're just basically showing that we're not going to make those estimates that we had put forward for the recap sheet.
It's helpful to understand that we could offset that by not expending the money to run those programs or run other programs. That's a little bit of a relief.
So,
yeah, I think the one note, and we brought this up yesterday too in finance team, is that, as you know, one of the things that we use in our reserves and we monitor is our free cash, and knowing that a lot of those unexpended revenues that were going to be used to cover our unexpended expenses that we're using to cover these revenue shortfalls. Both sides of that equation are impacts on our free cash. So that will be things that typically are revenue excesses go to free cash, as well as our unexpended expenditures. So now we're, with revenues being below estimates and using unexpended to go in, the expectation should be that, numbers going into free cash should be diminished as we go into fiscal year 21.
Right.
So Ian, this is Sayed, or Christy, this is to you. So does this affect our, so has the revenue shortfall, so the taxes, according to what Leah is saying, that since we already have a budget, we've already put out the taxes, that can't change. This is the revenue. Has this impacted the services that we're going to be providing till July 1st or not?
No. So this is
not.
No. This is right, because we're just talking about the current year right now.
But we're going to be eating, what Ian is saying is we're going to be eating because of the shortfall, we're going to have less free cash going into next year.
Yes.
Right.
Less of a contribution into free cash. We're not using free cash to cover this. We're using, basically unexpended expenses by freezing expenses. So we're not utilizing existing free cash to cover this, but what we're doing will limit the amount of new monies that would roll into free cash that gets certified next year.
So free cash won't be growing like it normally would.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Let's go forward.
Okay. So in looking ahead to fiscal 21, we looked at the revenue estimates again, and so we had to lower those numbers. Motor vehicle excise tax could be somewhere where we see a lower number because people aren't currently purchasing vehicles. But we did identify needed reductions for interest on taxes, school revenue, admin charges, other department revenue, investment income, hotel, motel, and meals taxes. And so just on these revenues, our estimated shortfall is $1 million, which would be an additional $125 on the average single-family tax bill if the budgets remain at the current level.
And this is $1 million versus what was put into our budget packets that we voted on.
Right. Leah, do you want to add anything to that?
When you say $1 million added, it's $1 million decreased.
Right.
So the revenues that we projected are now being projected to be $1 million less than what we had originally projected.
Correct. Yeah, I probably misspoke.
And
That's
Chris,
okay.
That's estimated to be a flat $125 increase on the average single family tax bill.
Right. If we do nothing.
If we do nothing, thank you.
Yeah.
And that also includes the 4% increase that was projected for the budget, right?
That's on top. Yeah, that's on top of the increase that we were projecting. So our average, we were projecting an increase of $457 per single family, and this would be an additional $125.
Got it. Thank you.
We're also looking at state aid, which remains unknown. We know that the state budget process is delayed, and so we're waiting for an announcement of what the process is going to be going forward. Syed and I were both on a call today where they talked about Massachusetts being in a better position than other states because we have such a high stabilization fund, but it's not enough, the $3.5 billion. And so because we don't really know what's happening with the state budget, we've adjusted the estimate for what the local aid levels will be. And so we kept them at FY 2020 levels, which is a reduction of the previous estimate of $375,183. So that's what we had estimated based on House 1. We had estimated that our state aid would increase by $375,183. We've removed that increase from our estimates. And so that would be another $50 on the average single family tax bill if the budget remains at current level. So this is showing you what I just said, which is that, prior to this, the budget that we had approved was a $457 increase. And with the impacts that we just discussed, if we do nothing, the increase would be $632 to the average single family. Again, this is based on what we know at this time.
Christy, could you go back one slide?
Yep.
I'm not sure if this seems slightly confusing to me. The current 2021 budget estimates include a state aid increase of $375,000.
Yeah.
But now we're saying that we aren't going to get that increase, but it's still the same number. So I'm not sure why it stays at $375,183.
No, we're reducing it to FY 20 levels. So
which was $375.
Which was $375,183 less than what we projected or what we had estimated for 21.
Okay, so you aren't showing what the actual projected new lower number would be. It would be helpful if you'd add that on there, because it looks like, just reading it quickly, that it stays the same. So if it's going to be decreased by $375, what would it end up being?
Okay. So
was it 5 million something, whatever? I mean, it's the state aid's a large number. I think what we're doing is what would increase year over year with 375. We're just assuming that.
I think it's 925 on our handout that we got in our packet.
Yeah. So just like, so the other slides are just showing what the decrease would be. So I just want to clarify that none of these numbers on these previous slides are what we're estimating them to be. These are the decreases that we're estimating.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Just in looking at our reserve balances, which we were asked about at previous meetings, the sale of real estate account, which is what we've recommended that the 9 Grove be purchased with, and also a portion of the Belknap Street property be purchased with. That's not held in investment, so that number remains constant. So that would stay at the $3 million that we've talked about previously. The open space account does rise and fall with the market. And so at the end of March, the balance was over $1 million, which was actually an increase from the previous month. The stabilization fund, again, is impacted by the market. And from February to March, we saw an increase of $13,286. The OPEB trust fund.
Amazing.
We'll wait to see what April brings. The OPEB trust fund, because it's a long-term investment strategy, it's more volatile. So at the end of March, the value was down to 6.4 million from 7.4. As of today, it's back up to 6.97 million. But again, this is a fund that is not expected to be expended. Certainly not on this warrant nor anytime soon. So this is a long-term investment strategy. Well, after we identified the potential or the estimates in lost revenue, what we did was I'd sent out that budget memo, but then we also held meetings with all the department heads last week during the week of April 6th. And that was, it was myself, Leah, and Kim met with each department head. So what the message was to the department heads as part of this budget memo was that they would need to look at their FY21 budgets and identify budget cuts, understanding that these cuts will have an impact on services. We absolutely presented to you what we thought was a level service budget for FY21. And so certainly any cuts in addition to, what we had previously cut would have impacts. And so what I'm going to show you now is each of the reductions that we put forward, and also what the impact of that would be. So in the Selectmen Town Manager budget, we reduced expenses by $10,350. Most of that was staff development line that we have in that budget for $20,000, which provides staff development for any employee in the town that finds that they want to attend a conference that they hadn't previously budgeted for. We have used that in the past for the Suffolk program that we've had several department heads complete in recent years. The finance director budget this is a tiny budget, so we took $60 and it was a over 5% reduction. But this is a subscription, or a membership for the Mass Government Financial Officers Association. About that. In the assessor's budget, we took $3,000 out of expenses, so they were budgeting for one less appraisal, which he budgets for. Treasurer collector, we took $1,000 out of training and education, so that's fewer conferences. Information technology, we took out the entire overtime line. So right now they have overtime for a staff member in their office, and so we've taken that out completely. For expenses, we've also taken out $500 from training and education. Town clerk, $1,175. This was from training and education. So the assistant would not attend the conference, the annual conference. And then we had increased the budget by $500 for FY21, but now we're recommending that it be level funded. Election registration, we took out $2,000, which would reduce the number of meals that we provide to election workers. So with early voting, those costs have gone up, so we would just reduce the number of meals. In conservation, we actually had to increase this budget slightly because we have a new director that's just started. They did start at the minimum step, but they started in April. And so we would need to, we needed to budget for them stepping to step 2 in April of 2021. But we did reduce their expenses by $2,000. And I know that that our new conservation director is talking with the DPW director to see if they can reduce that further. So this is the first year that we actually put that $15,000 into their budget. In the planning department, we reduced multiple things for the $2,000, but mostly in advertising, which they feel that they can take on because of the master plan article. We'll continue to fund some of that. Board of Appeals, we've actually, when we had our very long time Board of Appeals secretary leave a few months ago, we got creative. And so we actually have Paula Cavino, who's the admin in the Board of Health now, taking the minutes, so we can pay her on overtime to take the minutes. And then she's able to complete, the typing up of the minutes during her time at the Board of Health. So there's no additional cost. So we were actually able to reduce that salary wages by $10,000, and this was sort of a temporary solution, but we would just continue that for FY21. In economic development, we currently have a vacancy in that position, in the EDC coordinator position. We were waiting for the staffing study to come out before we advertised the position. And so we've had the town planner, the assistant town manager, and some of our administrative staff sort of taking on some of those responsibilities. Our proposal here is to continue to have those people take on that work and not hire or not fill this position until January 1st of 2021, which would be a $38,000 savings. Given the COVID-19 environment, we're not sure how easy, late summer would be to recruit. So the fall actually might be providing us a better opportunity for recruitment for this position. And we have also talked to the chair of the EDC about this, who is in agreement. And then we've reduced the expenses for the out-of-state travel by half because they would only be working for half the year. In buildings and grounds, we've cut $1,000 from their overtime wages. And so the intent of the facilities director is to charge for custodial services at Bay State Common events, which we haven't always done in the past. And then we've also cut $9,000 out of expenses, which would mean that we would cut window cleaning for both the town hall and the Forbes building, which is budgeted at $8,000. We would reduce the materials by $1,000, which had been increased for the Forbes Municipal Building. There's also potential for further reductions in working with and collaborating with other departments. Insurance, we cut $10,000 for professional services, but we reduced the OPEB to zero. As you all know, this isn't something that we take lightly, but given the current situation, we think that this was the right thing to do. In the police department, the chief has proposed to remove 2 of the 3 new police officer positions and hire the 3rd officer on July 1st instead of the previously intended October 1st. We've also reduced the expenses by $5,000 because we had budgeted certain expenses to get the police officers up and running, so psych evaluations, physical evaluations, clothing allowance. In the fire department, we've reduced salary and wages by $18,000. So that's reducing the call department from $10,000 to $2,000, which the chief believes he's able to do. And then also a savings of $10,000 for a new hire that didn't have has been hired since we put the budget together, that didn't have all of the certifications that we had budgeted for. And then he's also reduced his expense line. He had budgeted to seal coat the parking lot. We'll defer that to a future year, and then move more training to on duty, as well as purchasing some of needed equipment out of a gift account. It looks like my building commissioner line didn't copy over. But in the building department, we've reduced the expenses by $2,000, which is training and education. In the landfill budget, we've reduced that budget by $22,000, which would cancel a hazardous waste day, the hazardous waste day that we have. That's something that my understanding is we've done in the past when we've had difficult budgets. And so we would be able to advertise different ways that people could just dispose of their hazardous waste. And then we had added $3,000 for recycling education, which we're proposing to remove $2,000 of that. So leaving $1,000 in there for that. In the Board of Health Department, they had increased. We are removing $1,000, which we had budgeted for, which was an increase for one additional larva treatment, which is related to mosquito control. This is going to be an additional one. Council on Aging, we're reducing salary and wages by $37,000 by moving. There's 2 outreach workers, moving half their salary to the gift account that we just received. We see this as a one-time fix on sort of the impact. In the library, they had proposed to go from 30 to 35 weeks in the FY21 budget. This would bring us back to 30 to 35 weeks of Sunday operations. This would bring us back to the 30 weeks where we have the libraries open on Sundays. And then in expenses, they had some expenses that we're cutting that are related to technology. So they had planned to network all of their computers to one copier. They had also intended to upgrade their mobile app this year. So those things will not happen. And then they've reduced their training budgets also, so fewer conferences. So our total cuts, or our total expense reductions, were $863,153. Which was a 0.76% reduction in the budget. It's important to note that these reductions don't include a number from the schools. They're working on providing that number to us. And they also don't provide a number for the Department of Public Works, which we're meeting tomorrow with Chris to go over his proposed cuts to his 21 budget. So I know that was a lot. Thank you for letting me go through it. So if anyone has any questions, I can go back to the slides.
Chris, I have a couple questions, but just a technical one. I see Youth and Family Services on the packet that we received, but I didn't hear you mention it, and I wasn't looking at the slides. On the slide before, can you go to that one right before?
No, I think you're right.
Okay, I just want to make, it's mentioned that there are also cuts to that department.
Yes. Thank you for that.
I'm not sure it's on the slides.
Overtime.
Yeah. So they've moved their overtime from the budget. So that's $1,500 from the budget to the revolving account. And then they've also moved $1,700 also to the revolving account, which was budgeted for review of their strategic plan. And they've reduced travel and training and professional services. So their total reduction is $3,200. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
That should be the total number, though, still.
The total number is not accurate. But that's good.
Yeah, no, I just wanted it just for those that are sort of listening or watching. So I do have a couple of questions, but I guess a general one. Christy, this is a really hard first pass. I want to thank you and all the department heads and anyone that participated to roll up to these numbers for the work that was done, because it's painful to see it. And I would imagine it was, a painful yet willing process. So thank you to everyone for being so thoughtful. Do you anticipate that there would be a second pass beyond it? And you said DPW, we're looking at the capital expenditures, or is this sort of, you're comfortable where we're at with these numbers and, but it wouldn't go deeper?
So the direction to the department heads was just review the budget and tell me, where you can cut. So I didn't give them a percentage or a number. And so I would say, and thank you for, thanking all the department heads, because they all really did come to the table ready to cut their budgets. And so I think that as we get these other numbers that are outstanding, including the school, including the Department of Public Works, and then also we anticipate borrowing in May, so we could find a savings there. That's really going to inform the need for further cuts. But I would certainly be interested in hearing from the board if you feel like there are additional items that could be cut, or more specific, or more broadly, I guess, a number that you're looking to see. So if you take out that $550,000 for the OPEB, it was from the individual budgets, it was $313,000 was cut.
Yeah, I think the big thing to hit too was on that last page, and this was discussed in finance team yesterday, which the school department is part of. So the school superintendent, the chair of the school committee, and the business manager, we're all on the call. They are working on that. It is on their agenda for their meeting tomorrow night. So that they just didn't have their numbers in place yet, but we expect those will be the set of the next couple of weeks. There's a lot of things they're looking at, both in terms of this year's budget as well as next year's budget. So expect to become there.
We also don't know, and I mentioned it in the beginning, that we really just don't know what's going to happen with the state budget. We've talked about having our town meeting as late as June 20th, but we're not sure that that's even late enough for us to really have actual numbers from the state. But we will have that debt number. So that's something that we'll get next month.
The debt will be known. So a couple observations. There are several line items here that sort of pertain to safety. Some are more obvious, like cutting police officers. Others are a little softer, but I think, I guess, are somewhat concerning. Like when I look at, when I think about reopening buildings and maybe cutting back on materials, but thinking about the new world's post-COVID rise, are we actually going to be in a place where Jim needs more materials that previously we didn't have to purchase in order to keep the building safe? So I'm not asking for a comment on any of these, Christy, but just as you go through the process to, think about ranking, if you will, or prioritization of others that might remain on budget and not be cut. The other one that is the third larvae treatment. Thank you for letting us know what treatment that was, because I wasn't sure what we were treating. I presume that's town-wide and not a particular location, unless you tell us otherwise. That's sort of a general treatment, not a specific location.
So, I'm trying to remember what
we don't have to answer it now, but I'm gonna.
No, I just want to be clear that Steve had reached out to mosquito control at the state level, and so they think that they might be able to help out with that. So I think that's a good question, but we might actually be able to get some assistance.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do think it's a town-wide one. I mean, they look at it would be in certain areas, but it's in certain areas. It's not, hey, this neighborhood gets it, this doesn't. They really
right, exactly. Yeah.
Where they need to treat.
Right. It's just the third treatment of those identified areas, however they do that.
So just to continue on that particular one, it's based on wetlands, but if there all of a sudden was a jump in equine encephalitis, then maybe that would change and go up again. So
Right, exactly. And so again, thinking about public health and public safety of a different nature.
Also, just to your comment on the buildings and grounds budget, so that wouldn't impact. We actually contract out cleaning services. So, I mean, obviously could be potential need for additional materials, but that in terms of cleaning, we have a company that does that. So I just want to make sure people are aware of that.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Thanks. Can you explain a little bit more about the fire department reducing the call department, what that actually means? I think I know, but I don't want to assume.
So the fire department has a call department and they pay them stipends. And so for when they're
like reserve firefighters? They're not our employees.
Right, they're not our employees, right? So this doesn't include any layoffs. So this is just, he would retain the $2,000 in case the call department was used in FY 2021, but reducing it by the $8,000.
Okay, thank you. That's what I assumed. I'll hold my other questions. Thank you.
Others?
Ian?
Yep.
Yep. Can I ask? So my first question is about the insurance. At least my insurance company has reached out to me to say that I think I'm going to get some sort of a benefit because I'm not driving or something. So I'm just curious because many of us are not in the buildings. The buildings are closed. And the fact that that's insurance and electricity and gas has that translated into any real savings for us, Christy?
Insurance we would not see a savings. Actually, not being in the buildings is not as good as being in the buildings with insurance. And this again is budget that we're talking about. This cut for would be effective July 1st, and so we hope to be back in the buildings on July 1st. In terms of electricity and gas, I think that's yet to be seen as far as the reduction. I mean, we do certainly still have people going into the senior center, though it's very much reduced. We do have people in and out of the senior center so that they're serving that population. We have people in and out of the top two floors of the Forbes building, and certainly the same level of staff in the police department. And then in town hall, we do have some employees who are, alternating through during the week. But I don't think that we've seen it as significant savings at this point.
And even if the buildings were absolutely empty, you'd still need HVAC systems and other systems working to prevent humidity buildup and mold and other problems. So
right, but I was just thinking maybe there'd be a potential cut, but
I know that in some communities they're anticipating that for buildings that are shut down at this time, but our buildings aren't. None of our buildings are completely shut down.
Okay.
Yeah, I know Worcester today was in the paper that Worcester, because they shut down a number of their schools, so they But I wonder what happens to what Selectman Edinburgh said, because they may be facing other problems by shutting utilities and other stuff down.
And then just from the larva standpoint, I'll talk to Steve about this at our meeting. I am concerned about, hopefully we can get money from the state. We were a critical community last year. It has been it's been a relatively warm, relatively dry winter. So I'm concerned about the EEE, but I can talk to Steve about that at our meeting. But I also wanted to ask you, you mentioned that the police department would be hiring one less person, but is there going to be a hiring freeze across the town at this point?
So to clarify, in the FY21 budget, the police department, we were proposing 3 additional officers, all hired October 1st. This adjustment is to remove 2 of those new hires, so only 1 additional officer hired July 1st. And so this would be, for the police department, we're talking about new positions. We've certainly taken advantage of the economic development coordinator position being vacant by only funding it for half the year. We're aware of some additional positions where there's potential requirements. And if that were the case, we've talked about strategies for sort of leveraging those vacancies. But also given, the impacts of COVID-19, retirements that were planned might not happen.
Okay, so we haven't instituted a hiring freeze, but we're looking at...
To answer your question directly, sorry about that. So we have not instituted a hiring freeze.
Okay. And the other component of this, I know the capital plan is built on like a 5-year cycle. Is that going to be revisited separately from the budget process?
Yeah, so that is separate from the budget process. Those are all free cash, so that's not going to impact the taxes. But that being said, we've asked all of the department heads who have items on the capital plan to review those requests and to consider whether they should be deferred until the October town meeting at the earliest. Understanding that by deferring capital needs, they're not going to go away. So they could just impact us further. So, but we are reviewing that, and that's part of our warrant review.
Okay. And then just, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, just a couple of more questions.
Keep going.
I recognize that this is not the private sector. This is a public sector. We have separate unions that we have to deal with. But baked into the budget, correct me if I'm wrong, are certain increases to salaries. My question is it worthwhile just like revisiting, hey, this is there's been almost $1 million revenue shortfall. Is it worthwhile saying that for at least till we sort this out, that we not institute those step increases? Or is that too difficult to negotiate because those contracts have already been negotiated?
We would certainly have to engage the unions. I think before I just went directly to salaries in general, I would want to hear from the board how much more of a reduction you're looking for.
Got it. Well, I am certainly, if you're I'll just speak for myself. I'm obviously very, the economy is in a free fall. I am putting my Board of Health hat on. I am concerned about when we will restart it. Granted, there's been social distancing, but there have been some models that have shown that, remember, social distancing, it prevents the spread of the virus. It does not prevent the virus doesn't go away. There is concern that once we resume, the people that have been unexposed, but are carriers, but have been unexposed, they could get sick and we could have a spike later on in the year. So there is I'm looking that we should minimize any impact because we do not know what the economy is going to be like. I think we're in a very precarious situation. So I think we need to, I guess in a way, save as much of our money because we do not know what the future holds. And it looks, at least, again, I'm not an economist. I'm just concerned that this epidemic will last longer than many of us think.
Syed, this is Shelby. Are you looking for more than what Christy has presented here?
Well, the thing is that at least, Christy, with what you have right now, correct me if I'm wrong, this still maintains the 4% increase in taxes for next year. Am I correct in that? That still is going to happen, right? Am I right?
Well, this might be an easier way to look at it. So with 457, we talked about the estimates going to 632. With just the proposed reductions that I just presented to you, we're at 524. But I want to be crystal clear that we know that there are further cuts coming, and so I want to be very transparent about what the cost reductions that I just presented are doing to that 632. But I also want to be clear that these unknowns are, unknowns that we might know as early as tomorrow for the DPW, and as early as the next couple weeks for the school department. So they are unknowns that we will know before the June 20th town meeting, except for potentially state aid. And so I think the borrow will really inform what the full reduction could be. And so, waiting, certainly doing the work, but waiting for final decisions until after that has happened, I think would be good.
But is it fair to say the intent right now is to basically, with the revenue reductions, is to attempt to offset so that where we were prior to this happening is not made worse?
Right, exactly. Yes. We're trying to neutralize the impact. Yep.
Right. So, Ian, if I may.
Yep, go ahead.
So at the start of the presentation for fiscal year 21, we looked at pretty conservative assumptions resulting in roughly $1 million in lost revenue, plus the assumption that state aid won't increase at all. So for a total revenue impact of about $1.38 million. Chris, if you can go back one slide, without the school department and the DPW, without knowing what's happening with state aid or the borrowing, we've been able, I think, been pretty aggressive in capturing, 863 of that. We're actually not that far away. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility once we see where the school department can come in, where public works and what happens with the borrow, that, we're sort of back to, to level ground. One of the things, being a small business owner, and going through these exact gyrations for my own, business that we're looking at in the town, one of the things we always have to be careful of is that decisions we make don't prevent us from maintaining a critical mass to provide, the services that are most essential. And so, for me, continuing to get the numbers, continuing to refine this and to see what we can do is the right path. I think going back to town employees and asking them to take it on the chin should be a last resort, particularly given that so many of our town employees are, and I would consider, first responders who are out there right now when it's not safe to be out there because they have to be out there. Or keeping the town running smoothly requires that they be out there. And so, and it's not just police and fire, it's public works, it's other departments as well, that still have to get the job done. And so I think this approach is great. I think it's sound. I think this is the first go round. There will be many, many gyrations over the next 4 to 6 weeks. And I think we focus on making the best decisions we can with the best available information we have at the time. And I definitely want to thank the finance team and Leah for doing the analysis and doing the projection work. That's never an easy thing to do. And yes, it's a lot more than, licking the finger and putting it up in the air to see which way the wind's blowing. It's a lot of effort, in behind this. And I appreciate that very much.
Thanks,
want to add that the reductions that we're proposing, the additional reductions that we've identified as forthcoming, none of that has included using free cash or our stabilization fund. And if we can do this without using free cash and without using our stabilization fund, that would be great. But if we do get to the fall and something else happens with the pandemic, I would say that these very much unforeseen situations are exactly why we protect our reserves and protect our stabilization and protect our free cash. And at that point, that's when we would look to use those funds for exactly what they were intended for.
That's the piece I was going to add. That Lee, I'm going to let you go next. I apologize there, but I think that's the thing to consider here is that the tax rate that we talked about in the following slide that Christy had. Again, remember that doesn't get set until after our October town meeting. So I think, as Alan said, this is the first of many discussions we're going to have here up through June town meeting and post that. But I think we're going to see different things. We don't know what we don't know. So it's very clear. And I think it's why Christy started the presentation. This is what we know today. And we're hopefully going to know more, good or bad, over the next weeks and months. And we do have some tools in our toolkit. And most notably what you just had in terms of reserves. I think going to reserves too early is a bad mistake. I think what we're doing here is the right way to handle it. We'll see where we'll go. But Lee, sorry, I know you wanted to speak and I jumped in on you, so apologize.
Thank you very much. Again, I want to reiterate all the work everybody did, including all the department heads. I've been through this before at UMass at different times, and it's a very difficult process, and I think you all have done it with grace and a lot of good, hard rationale, good work and good rationale. I think one of our biggest wild cards, aside from the economy as a whole and COVID as a whole, is the state finances. I mean, Baker is putting out a tremendous amount of resource to keep the infrastructure of this state safe, the healthcare infrastructure. So when I listen to him say $1 million here, $1 million there, and all this stuff, I think I'm glad he's got a good fund, but I am worried about that. And then on the union side, I think Christy and the union leaders worked very hard, even though I guess we still have the clerical hanging out there, but the unions worked very hard to come up with really a pretty moderate set of increases. And there was a lot of negotiation back and forth. And I think to even think about them right now in terms of revisiting that wouldn't be considered in good faith, and it would be unprecedented. And I think we're going to have to look at municipalities overall and how they deal with their union staff in the future, even though this is an unprecedented situation. Going after that, basically our safety staff and all three of those big departments just would be a morale buster for everybody and not necessary. We got to do other things.
Yeah, Lee, I totally agree. I think we've got a number of other levers to pull on before we even contemplate that.
If I could throw something out here, and I'll be the bad guy in the room. The one piece in here that I guess is slightly bothersome to me is I appreciate the reduction that was made in the police department from 3 down to 1. But to the comments of kind of the unknowns and whatnot, moving the one up till July 1st, so it's an add to staff that we're putting on. And I guess it goes to Selectman Hashmi's comments is, we don't know what we don't know. And I'm hopeful and optimistic that we won't be in the situation, but God forbid we get to a situation where we might need to look at employees, whatever. I would hate to I just feel like adding someone at this time may not be the right call. And I think still very supportive, but I'm wondering whether it makes more sense to almost wait for that one till October town meeting to see where we are by putting that on. I have not talked to the police chief. Christy, you may have more insight into, kind of the moving the one up to July 1st. And I also don't know what the dollar impact would be to move that back, or the, safety impact to it. But it's just one that kind of stuck out to me, where we're deferring a lot of other things. The question about a hiring freeze, which we don't have on, but, adding a new staff member at this time, I guess just, I'm wondering if that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that I think, and Leah and Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we estimated the additional months is about $5,000 a month. That's what we got? I'll let them correct me as I go. But so, I mean, certainly we have a hiring plan in place. And, we were very supportive of that hiring plan, and we certainly came forward with the fiscal 21 budget. That the 3 was what we had committed to. And, some of that, a lot of that was a result of the staffing study, but some of it was also in response to the request of the community to have, a station officer, to have additional community policing programs. And so, reducing it down by the 2 officers allowed us to maintain the hiring implementation plan, even though it wasn't fully there. Bringing it back to the July 1st, I mean, certainly initially, prior to the fiscal 21 budget, we had talked about bringing these officers on, some July 1st and some January 1st. And so that October 1st was sort of a meet in the middle, so that we could bring them all on at the same time for the same cost as was originally proposed. And so since we were removing 2, the question was, can we move them back to July 1st? I mean, I think that, if the board wants to discuss it further, I think that we could certainly do it in a future meeting and ask you to come in.
I think, Ian, I appreciate you being courageous and asking the question, because it's not an easy one to ask. But I do think, again, as we go through iterations of this, and we have clarity with other numbers, I think it's a fair one to keep out there with a question mark. I mean, will our services be so greatly impacted by deferring a hire to October? I don't know. I would certainly want to hear from the chief to understand that at some point. But I think it's an open box for me at this moment.
Ian, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Christy, there are some warrant articles regarding land purchases in previous town meeting articles that have not gone through. Have we considered, if those purchases are not going through, to cancel them, so that money, I guess, does that go back to free cash because it was appropriated by town meeting? Because that gives us another potentially, I guess, $400,000 or something.
Previously approved articles.
Yeah, I think there was a previously approved article.
There is one that's hanging out there, but it would require a town meeting vote, and it was a borrow that was going to be paid back with walk-up Robinson funds, and so it would have to be a town meeting action to rescind the borrow. So that would have to come in.
So that's a nothing, right? Because it was a borrow, it never happened. Am I getting that correct? It doesn't affect our free cash. Am I right?
And I think if I heard you correctly, Syed, the sale of real estate, if we don't move forward those just stay in the sale of real estate account. Those don't go to free cash, or they don't offset. They can't be used to offset a budget item.
Okay, okay, thank you. That's what I was getting at. Thank you.
Great. So, Chris, can you just talk about maybe the timing of next step? I think the question came out. We know that capital articles are coming. We've talked about the school things, but what's your thinking in terms of next steps?
So we have a couple departments that we haven't talked to, and we know that we're gonna hear from the school in, I think, I think they told us in early May they would have a number. And then, our next step for the finance team is to start reviewing the warrant articles. Like I said, I've already sent something out to all their department heads that were requesting capital. So we'll be having these similar meetings with those department heads to talk about the capital items that they've requested. Just as a reminder, they're all proposed. None of them are proposed to as a raise and appropriate. So even though it is prudent at this time to protect free cash if we are able to, we don't want to defer capital requests or capital needs for too long, because then we end up spending money on maintenance potentially, or there could be a safety issue. But we certainly are going to look at being able to defer some of these capital requests to October when we have a better idea of the economy. And then we'll review all the remaining warrant articles. So inclusive of that is all the land purchase articles that we have on the upcoming warrant. And I know that the school department, we talked to them at the finance team meeting about the kindergarten. So I'm sure that they'll discuss that, I would think, tomorrow night, discuss it publicly tomorrow night.
Christy, this is such a great presentation that you and the team have done. Are you going to be posting this online?
I'm going to add youth and family services before I do.
Okay. But this will be online so that the residents can access this, right?
Yeah, and I'll also do a PDF of the spreadsheet. I actually think the spreadsheet's easier to look at, if you're just looking at it yourself, but not necessarily on the this medium.
Well, this presentation is this presentation that you have is actually really good.
Thank you.
It's very, very self-explanatory. It's. So I wouldn't. You can just put in it's a first run through.
Yep.
I think what you're saying with the PDF, it does look. Because it's coming from a spreadsheet, it's easy to look at in totality versus.
I can do both. Yeah.
I think doing both would be great.
Yep.
As a number guy, I like to see it in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I'm colors, man. I'm all
I was
about
going
the
to say I
colors.
like the colors, but yes.
My right brain, left brain, or whatever it is, Any other questions on this? But again, I think what everyone said, just to reiterate, you heard loud and clear from the board. Thank you, and please pass that along to the department heads. This is not easy, but thank you to them for what they did here.
Thank you. I definitely will. And Leah and Kim are obviously on the call. I don't know if they have anything they want to add, but they obviously did a ton of work.
I guess I would just have to say that, this is just original estimates, not going to know really a lot of numbers as we work through this and as this thing hopefully comes to a close. If it flares back up in the fall, we could be in for bigger issues with receipts. So again, this is hopefully worst case scenario at this point. Hopefully it'll be better, but I just want to put it out there that everyone needs to realize that things could get worse and not better. So
Leah, I'm guessing you like spreadsheets better than PowerPoints.
Yeah, I do.
But I think this is something, Leah, I thought you were going to say it, but Leah said it during the finance team meeting yesterday.
I don't want to push it too much.
I think that we always go in with conservative estimates in revenue. That's something that's been a hallmark of what Leah has put out in the past. Which, even though we're seeing the impacts this year, there are a lot of communities that aren't as conservative that are facing bigger impacts. So being conservative, has done us well in the past. It's helped with our free cash. I think it's the right way to do things. This is a difficult situation, but I do, hopefully things move forward and the numbers we're showing right now are conservative as well. I think they are, but again, we don't know what's going to happen and there could be impacts there, but I think, we're doing the best we can and the finance team's doing the best they can. I think those numbers are, good numbers, but conservative numbers of what we know today. And we'll continue to look at it. Great. Christy, town manager's report.
So my report is, pretty much the communications that we've been putting out related to COVID-19. So I don't have much in addition to that, except that we have heard from CMRPC that they're ready to schedule a kickoff meeting for the via shuttle. And so we'll have that hopefully this week, and I'll have more to report. But that's something that we've been waiting for. And then with COVID, it didn't take place, but that's something that we're hoping to keep moving forward.
Great.
That's it.
Okay. Issues and correspondence of the Selectmen. Selectman Hashmi.
Well, I first want to, this has been such an unprecedented event. I want to start by again thanking the town staff and our residents for going through this with dignity and with compassion. It's amazing the small acts of kindness that you see when you're going around the town, and it gives me certainly hope for a better future. The other thing I just wanted to bring up as an item of discussion, I know Christy and the town staff have a lot on their plate right now, but I just wanted to bring up the fact that at least 4% of mortgage borrowers countrywide have stopped making their payments. One of the last things you want to do is have people homeless or being evicted. So Mayor Walsh had worked with 12 housing lenders that service mortgages in Boston to delay mortgage payments. So I was, granted Westborough is very small. I was wondering if at some point the board wanted to work with other towns to work on a system where we could do the same. I mean, we can't do it by ourselves. We're not as big as Boston, but if we got together with Northborough, Southborough, Marlborough, maybe we could work out a system where people can do that. And one of the concerns that I have is that if you delay your payment, then you get stuck with a larger bill. So we need to work out a system. So I just bring that up to the board's attention, that if they, I think that's something that we should, again, I know Christie has very limited bandwidth. The town has very limited bandwidth, but if we work with other towns who may have more bandwidth, we may be able to. So I raise that as something that we could potentially have as a agenda item moving forward, and that's it for me.
Jumping on that, I think I understand what that is. I guess a question is, do we know whether the MMA has anything that they're doing on that?
I'll let Christy answer that. I can find out. If Christy, do you want me to, or whatever, one of us can reach out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer right now, but
Syed, I'm sorry. What are you suggesting? I'm not understanding.
So, Mayor Walsh has worked with 12 housing lenders that service mortgages in the Boston area. That's to allow homeowners to delay mortgage payments. And what I'm saying is, we're too small to ask mortgage lenders to do the same. But if we partner with other communities in our area, such as Marlborough, Southborough, Northborough, maybe we can. I'm sure that the lenders in Westborough are the same as the lenders in Northborough, are the same as the lender potentially in Shrewsbury or Marlborough. That we can, as a Metro West, work with these lenders to potentially allow the homeowners to delay mortgage payments. This is a very uncertain time. People have lost their jobs, have lost their income. They're not. So it's just something I wanted to say that we could look into. Again, we can't do this by ourselves. We would need to get buy-in from other towns. But if we go ahead.
If I may, I believe this is being addressed at the state level at this point, and that in some of the directives from the government, there was a request to all lenders in Massachusetts to initially provide a mechanism of forbearance to halt payments on mortgages with a recovery process. So I believe the state is already asking all mortgage lenders to put some relief valve and recovery mechanism in place.
The problem is that you have to, at least the one that I saw, and we can reach out to the MMA to ask for more information. At least one of the concerns that I had is that, you can delay it, but after that delay, you're supposed to pay the full amount.
But so
that may,
So that isn't necessarily the case because the mortgage companies have been asked to provide a recovery. So the forbearance would say, yes, if you skip 3 payments at the end of 90 days, you owe the full 3 payments plus the current payment. But the mortgage companies also have recovery plans that says at the end of the forbearance, if you can't make those payments in full, there are other mechanisms to pay those 3 payments in part over an extended period of time. And that the mortgage companies, I believe, have been instructed to set up those processes and those systems. So checking with the MMA is a great idea. I also think potentially checking with the task force and the command center at the government, at the state level would be worthwhile.
Yeah,
See
maybe
what that process is.
Why don't I do that then? I can do that. That's not a problem. I can do that. I'll find out. I'll circle back.
Great. Syed, other things, Syed?
Well, I think, Syed, to your point, thank you for explaining it. I do think that that's, maybe a question that the town task force wants to understand I'm not charging the task force with getting the information, but I do think that might be information that the task force needs to understand, or groups like Youth and Family Services, Senior Center, as those questions come in. I could see someone calling and saying, I'm concerned about making payments. Do you know anything? What's a resource? Have you heard? That sort of thing. So I think it's worth understanding how our local banks are handling this, which may hold many both residential and business mortgages. I'm not sure that as a town we could be taking on an initiative to approach them with anything. It might be more informational.
Well, let me start with the MMA, and then I can circle back with you guys.
I mean, we have, yeah. So there might be a role here for the EDC, even reaching out and having some conversations with local banks, which is where I was going with to understand what's in place.
Yeah, I think the third place would be if we can with our legislators to what Alan talked about with what may be going on the state level in terms of their work to see if there's anything they're doing there. I guess the other question that came up during the Board of Health meeting, and Chris, I don't know if you know, but because I don't know what powers we have. It's in terms of, it seems like some cities have the ability to delay evictions, that type of stuff. Through some order they have. I don't know that we have that power as a board, or does anybody in Westborough, or what that authority is?
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't know that you as a board have that authority. I don't know. And then I would say that, what Syed's proposing is more of a conversation and understanding than it is an actual order from.
That's exactly it. It's a conversation. But let me first get if you have the permission, I'll reach out to the MMA to get at least the data. And with regard to the point that Ian was talking about, that is specifically related to evictions. And that is basically based on the health and stability of the people that are living in that community. And that is a separate, that is about protecting, getting people out, protecting people from being out on the street in the middle of an epidemic. So am I making the distinction?
Yeah.
Ian, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do think that we need to watch that situation closely, Syed. I know that through the task force, some of the discussions, although certainly not specific to any family or individual in particular, but it certainly has been implied that there may be less savory landlords that are would not be adhering to the governor's orders about stays on any sort of evictions. So it may be something that as a town we need to take up through a reinforcement of a communication.
And so Ian, just one last thing. I just wanted to raise the issue that, again, people are, have gone through a tremendous stress, and and that stress will continue. People aren't meant to be in their homes for a prolonged period of time, and it's understandable that it'll be a stressful period of time. So I would just, in case anyone is listening, I would just encourage them that there are multiple avenues for help in the town. And I hope that we will continue to emphasize that this town has those resources. I mean, the police department has those resources, youth and family services has those resources, school department has those resources. So there's no shame in saying that you need to access those resources. And I'll just stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Syed. Yep.
I apologize. I left off two things. First of all, I just wanted to thank the department heads. We've been meeting via Zoom every Friday, and they've been working, excellently with their staff and sort of dealing with everyone being home and themselves being home and sort of, taking care of their families and taking care of their employees. So it's just been great to work with them as we go through this. And then I also just forgot to mention the task force, which Syed's comments reminded me of, and I know that Shelby and Lee, because they sit on it with me, I'm sure we'll add comments, but I just wanted to say that we continue to meet regularly, and we're talking specifically about some of the concerns that Syed's raising as far as making sure that people are aware of the resources in the community. I think that we feel very fortunate to sit on the task force because we get to hear about all of the great things that are going on in the community, always, but, specifically in response to COVID-19. So I'll let Lee and Shelby give more detail on that.
Thanks, Christy. Lee, I'm going to go to you next if you're...
Oh, thank you, Ian. Yeah, just to follow up on what Christy did as our town manager, she had a speaker on stress reduction or dealing with stress for the department head meeting. And I thought that showed a lot of sort of compassion and understanding for our town department heads that Christy did that specifically. So my comments to our public is I hope everybody realizes that as hard as it is, we have to keep up with the isolation. We have to be really careful about that. And I think every week that goes by, it gets more difficult, especially for families with teenagers and toddlers who need more space. It's just a difficult thing, but we've got to do that as Governor Baker keeps emphasizing. And please don't flush anything down the toilet except for toilet paper. And I think that because everything is so stressful, there are more people walking their dogs than there used to be, and they're using the trails more. And I want them to be mindful that we do have a leash law. I've heard a couple of complaints about dogs actually going on private property and damaging things, and then the dog owners saying, you can't do anything about this. We can take our dogs anywhere. So I'm going to work with the animal control officer and Chief Lowry to get a clearer message and emphasis out on that. As a kind of alarming thing happened this week in that area. And then if anybody has even a small amount that they'd like to give to do something, the food pantry is always accepting donations that help to go toward $25 gift cards for use in the grocery stores. So it isn't like you have to give $100 or $5,000. You can say, gee, I've got $15 that could go toward a $25 card. And they can do that. I think, where do they call to do that, Christy, for the food pantry? If they want to give, a small donation to the food pantry?
You can go to you can call the food pantry, but you can also leave cards in the drop box in front of town hall. People have done that, and we've gotten those to them.
Yeah. So even if it's a $15 gift card, it could go together with somebody else's 10 and they'd have 25. Okay. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. Shelby?
Great. Thank you. I'll build off of Lee's comments. First of all, for folks that are interested in contacting the food pantry, 508-366-3007. They also have a website you can look up. I do want to thank everyone who's participated on the task force. We've had some great conversations addressing or identifying what groups are doing throughout town. Those are a combination of independent organizations, town departments, and just small individual groups of volunteers. So I feel like we have a pretty good inventory of the work that is being done. I also want to reassure the public that the groups that are identified on the task force are well connected in the community. And I feel very confident after sitting through a couple meetings that they really have a pulse on the individuals who need help, regardless of age, demographic, where they live, or anything. Now, that's not to say that the needs will increase and the scope of individuals today who don't need help may increase. And that's the whole purpose of the task force, is to identify who needs something now and to anticipate as best as we can what the future needs will be. So to that end, the task force is actively working on creation of a town fund that will be used to help those who are most vulnerable. The details of the fund are being fleshed out sort of as we speak. Well, maybe not now at this time, but and the mission will be a great way to connect the community, those that have the ability to donate money, to then donate that money to a 501c3 to then be where funds will be then shared through organizations that will help folks with food insecurity, preventing homelessness, and just all the needs that go along that we're all too aware of. So I want to thank everyone who's been involved in that effort so far. I also want to thank Christy and the team, or whoever did it. I was sitting at Lyman Street and East Main, and I was looking at the Lyman Street board and waiting, and it was raining yesterday, and it was really depressing. And I didn't pull my phone out because I knew it was illegal to do that, even though I was sitting there at a red light. But to see that sign flash multiple times, thanking a variety of groups, restaurants, UPS, FedEx delivery drivers, the town workers, it was sort of, I felt like I was sort of in this movie moment where like the rain is pouring, but there's this like flashing happy sign thanking people. So it's sometimes in this day and age, it's the little things that matter, and that burst of happiness that we need. So thank you.
I think that was, I just wanted to give her credit.
I'm sorry?
I think that was Sela that did that. So I want to give
Well, thank you, Sela. Great idea. Thank you. I know you're tuning in tonight, taking your minutes. I also do want to remind folks, I have seen, it seems like a lot of folks driving very fast. I'm not sure where they're going. Without a lot of cars on the road, you shouldn't be late to anything. And I guess in most cases, you probably shouldn't be even out unless you have to be. So please slow down. Lots of walkers, as Leah's already said, lots of little kids out just, getting fresh air. But people, particularly on Church Street, Chief Laurie, if you're needing a place to park, you can pull in our driveway. But seriously, I'm very concerned with the speed. Lee, thank you for mentioning the dogs being off leash. I've had a number of complaints come to me. Folks, we have a leash law. Get your dogs on a leash. You don't want your dog impounded. That would be a terrible thing to have happen in what is already a really, really bad time for all of us. And on a bright note, and something that I haven't really committed to fully yet, Westborough Public Schools has challenged all of us for the Community Fitness Challenge. You can learn more about that by going to the Westborough Public Schools website. Basically, if you exercise 10 minutes, it equals 1 mile. In the town, I don't have today's number. I should have had that. I think we've already, as a town, exercised like over 20,000 miles. It's a great program, and exercise could literally be chair yoga. It doesn't mean you have to be out running. So be well, be safe, and thanks for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you, Toby. Alan.
Okay, thank you. Great stuff, Shelby, and everyone, and Syed and Lee. I sort of want to focus my issues and correspondence on some of the broader assistance and recovery tools that are available both to businesses and to individuals. First thing, it appears that the U.S. Treasury stimulus checks, per person checks, are going out by direct deposit. So if anybody gets a phone call from someone claiming to be from the IRS or the Treasury Department, or your bank asking for personal information and account information in order to get your payment, that is a scam. and they're going to steal your money. So just hang up the phone and move on with your life, please. We're seeing a large increase in the number of those types of scams by phone and by email as well. For individuals, know that if you're out of work because you are sick with COVID-19, coronavirus, or you are taking care of a family member or someone in your household, under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, you have expanded rights to paid sick leave and expanded family and medical leave. That pay is paid for by your employer and gets reimbursed. Your employer does get reimbursed by the government in the form of tax credits later in the year. So if you need that paid time off to take care of yourself or family members, contact your employer. We're gathering some more of this information, working with Christy and the team to get more of it onto the website as well. So we'll have links to the forms and some posters so you understand your rights. Also know that those extended rights include people who need to take some time off of work to take care of a child who's home because the schools are closed. And so that's part of it as well. On the business side, the SBA payroll protection program, again, the loan approvals are starting to happen. There still appears to be a delay in fund disbursement. So for businesses who applied when the program first opened, hopefully you're getting your loan approval numbers early this week. Funds can take anywhere from 3 days to a couple weeks to get after you get your loan approval number right now. As of Friday, if you earn your money as a contractor, getting paid with a 1099 instead of a W-4, or you're a sole proprietor, or other certain types of partnerships where you don't take a salary, you get a share of the profits of the business, you can now apply for those payroll protection loans. The first person to talk to is the branch manager of the bank where you do your banking. If your bank doesn't participate in the program, ask them for a personal referral to an SBA lender who is participating so that you get moved and your request gets handled quickly. Banks right now are a bit overwhelmed with the number of people and number of businesses requesting assistance. So naturally, they're working with their existing customers first. Next in line are people who they're introduced to, as opposed to someone who just makes a cold call off the street. So those resources are available as well. For businesses who applied for the emergency $10,000 grant, the SBA clarified what that is. It is actually $1,000 per employee up to a maximum of $10,000. So if you're a small business with fewer than 10 employees and you were planning on 10, know that it will be less than that, and you might need to adjust your plans and your financial projections accordingly. The broader economic injury disaster loan program, as of end of business on Thursday, the funds available for loans were $17 billion. The total requests through loan applications were $383 billion. So there's not quite enough to meet 4.5% of the need until Congress and the President act. So if you've applied for the loan, even if you've got an approval, know that the SBA is limiting disbursements to $15,000. And so you might want to talk to your financial advisor, your accountant, whoever you're working with in your business, to just make sure that if you're counting on that money sooner rather than later, you might need to make some alternate arrangements there. And so we'll continue to collect information and keep that portion of the town website up as a resource you can go look at as new information becomes available and new programs launch.
Great.
And that's it for me.
Thanks, Alan. I actually just two quick things. One is Karen Henderson, thank you, and Westborough TV for the work you're doing, continue to do for us, but also for all the other departments. Great job. Really, really appreciate it at this time and working through that. Second thing is, as a green community, we have Earth Day coming up. The Community Land Trust always does a town cleanup. It's definitely changed this year, but if you go to their the Land Trust website, they are still asking folks to pick an area of town where they will clean up on their own. And what I would ask with that is that folks take proper precautions. If there's things that you don't want to pick up. Well, we're trying to make it clean. Don't feel obligated, but if folks can help out, they'll get the instructions on that site to pick an area over the next week time frame to clean up that specific area that you choose, and you'll get the instructions. In most cases, you can leave the yellow bags of trash in your area, and they'll get picked up, I believe, by the DPW, or they'll instruct you that you need to do something else with them. But I would encourage folks to participate if they would like to. That is everything that I had. Anything else from anybody? If not, well, thank you.
A motion to adjourn?
Yes, looking for a motion to adjourn. After the We Love WTV.
Second.
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
And moved and seconded by Selectman Emery. Roll call vote. Selectman Emery.
Emery, yes.
Selectman Marshall.
Marshall, yes.
Selectman Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, yes.
Selectman Hashmi.
Yes.
And Selectman Johnson, yes. Thank you, everybody.
So
Yeah, be safe. Be safe.